My grandson called me late at night. Grandpa, I am at the police station. My stepfather beat me, but he is telling them I attacked him. My mom does not believe me. When I got to the station, the officer went pale and stammered, I am sorry, I did not know. He should have known. Because I am Augustus King, and I was about to burn their world down. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to stand up to family who underestimated your worth. 2 to 14 a.m. The digital numbers on my bedside clock burned red in the darkness. The phone rang again, a sharp, intrusive sound that shattered the silence of my empty house. I did not grope for it blindly. My hand snapped out and grabbed the receiver before the third ring. I was awake instantly, a habit from 30 years as a federal prosecutor. You never know when the call comes that changes everything. Gus, it is me. The voice was a whisper, broken and terrifyingly small. It was Leo, my 14-year-old grandson. He sounded like he was hiding in a closet, trying not to breathe. Leo, where are you? I asked. My voice was calm, but my blood instantly turned to ice. I am at the 4th precinct. Please, Grandpa, you have to come. Brad, he went crazy. He started hitting me in the garage. But when the police came, he told them I attacked him with a wrench. Mom is here, and she is taking his side. She says I am high. I am not high, Grandpa. I swear. I did not waste time asking for details. I did not ask if he was hurt, because the tremor in his voice told me everything I needed to know. He was terrified, and he was alone. Listen to me, Leo. Do not say another word to anyone. Not to your mother. Not to Brad. And especially not to the police. Tell them you are invoking your right to counsel and you want your grandfather. I am on my way. I hung up. I threw off the covers and stood up. My joints popped, a reminder that I was 68 years old, not 40, but the rage fueling my movements made me feel timeless. I dressed in the dark. Slacks, a button-down shirt, my boots. I did not put on a tie. This was not a courtroom. This was war. I walked to the safe in the closet. The combination was muscle memory. Inside lay my old service pistol, a Sig Sauer P226. I checked the magazine. Full. I did not intend to use it, but I never went into a volatile situation without insurance. I tucked it into the lockbox I kept in my truck. I walked out into the cool night air. My house, a modest ranch on the outskirts of town, was silent. It was the house I had bought to retire in, to fish, to read books, to forget the scum I had spent a lifetime putting behind bars. But scum has a way of finding you. I climbed into my Ford F-150. The engine roared to life, breaking the stillness of the neighborhood. I backed out of the driveway and hammered the gas. The tires screeched against the asphalt. Bradford Sterling. The name tasted like bile in my throat. My daughter Rachel had married him 2 years ago. A real estate developer with a flashy smile and a handshake that felt like a wet fish. I never liked him. I never trusted him. But Rachel was blind. She saw a savior. I saw a shark. And now that shark had bitten my grandson. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. The streetlights blurred past me like streaks of fire. I ran a red light at the intersection of Main and 3rd. I did not care. If a cop pulled me over, he could follow me to the station. For years, I had kept my distance. I let Rachel live her life. I let her make her mistakes. I bit my tongue when she sold her mother's jewelry to invest in one of Brad's schemes. I stayed silent when they stopped coming to Sunday dinner. But tonight, the silence was over. Brad had crossed a line. He had put his hands on Leo. And he was about to learn that Augustus King might be retired, but he was not dead. I pulled into the parking lot of the 4th precinct. I saw Rachel's SUV parked near the entrance. I parked next to it, cutting the engine. I took a deep breath, burying the grandfather who wanted to cry and summoning the prosecutor who wanted to destroy. I opened the door and stepped out into the night. It was time to go to work. The fluorescent lights of the precinct hummed with a headache-inducing flicker. The air smelled of stale coffee floor wax and the specific sour sweat of people having the worst night of their lives. I pushed through the double doors, my boots striking the linoleum with a heavy rhythmic thud. I did not look around. I knew exactly where to look. Bradford Sterling was leaning against the front desk. He looked like he had just stepped out of a country club locker room. He was wearing a navy polo shirt and khakis. He was holding a styrofoam cup of coffee, chatting with the desk sergeant like they were old war buddies. There was not a mark on him. His hair was perfectly coiffed. His face was clean-shaven and untouched. He looked relaxed. He looked confident. He looked guilty. Then I looked past him through the wire-reinforced glass of the holding area. My heart slammed against my ribs. Leo was sitting on a metal bench, hunched over his own knees. Even from 20 feet away, I could see the damage. His left eye was swollen shut, a purple lump the size of a golf ball. His lip was split wide open, a jagged line of dried blood running down his chin. He was holding his side, favoring his ribs. He looked small. He looked broken. I felt a cold clarity wash over me. This was not a fight. This was a beating. I walked straight toward the desk. Brad saw me first. His smile faltered for a fraction of a second, a glitch in his perfect mask, before reassembling into a look of practiced concern. "Augustus," he said, stepping forward, his hands raised in a gesture of peace. "I am so glad you are here. This whole thing is a disaster." Leo just snapped. I tried to restrain him, but he was out of control. I did not stop. I did not even look at him. I walked right past him toward the gate that separated the lobby from the booking area. "Whoa there, old-timer." The voice boomed from behind the high desk. The desk sergeant stood up. He was a big man with a thick neck and eyes that said he enjoyed his authority a little too much. His name tag read Kowalski. He moved to block my path, crossing his arms over his chest. "You cannot go back there," Kowalski said, his voice dripping with condescension. "That is a restricted area. You need to take a seat on the bench and wait your turn like everyone else." I stopped. I was 2 feet away from him. I looked up at him. He was younger than me, maybe 45, but he was soft. I could see the arrogance in his eyes, the assumption that I was just another confused grandfather, another helpless civilian he could bully. "Old-timer," I repeated softly, testing the words. I reached into the inside pocket of my jacket. Kowalski's hand dropped instinctively toward his belt, but he stopped when he saw what I pulled out. It was not a weapon. It was a leather wallet worn smooth by decades of use. I slammed it onto the counter. The sound was sharp like a gavel striking wood. It slid across the laminate and stopped inches from Kowalski's hand. "Open it," I said. Kowalski looked at the wallet, then at me. He scoffed, rolling his eyes. "Look, sir, I do not care who you think you are. Open it." The command cut through the noise of the station. It was the voice I had used to cross-examine cartel bosses and corrupt senators. It was the voice that had earned me my nickname. Kowalski hesitated. He picked up the wallet and flipped it open. He glanced at the gold badge. Then he looked at the ID card next to it. I watched his eyes scan the text. Federal prosecutor, Southern District, retired. But it was the name that stopped him. Augustus King. The color drained from his face so fast it looked like a magic trick. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. He looked from the badge to me, and suddenly he did not see an old man anymore. He saw the hammer. He saw the man who had put half the corrupt cops in this state behind bars in the 90s. "I am sorry," he stammered, taking a step back, his arrogance evaporating. "Mr. King, I did not know. I had no idea he was your grandson." I leaned over the counter, my face inches from his. "You did not know," I asked, my voice low and dangerous. You did not know that you are holding a 14-year-old boy without medical attention while the man who put him there stands in your lobby drinking your coffee. Is that what you did not know, Sergeant? Kowalski swallowed hard. He looked at Brad, then back at me. Panic was setting in. Sir, the stepfather said the kid attacked him. He said the kid was high on meth. We were just following protocol. Protocol, I spat the word out. Open that gate, now, or I will make it my personal mission to ensure you are directing traffic in the rain for the rest of your short career. Kowalski fumbled for the buzzer. The gate clicked open. I pushed through, not waiting for another apology. I had to get to Leo, and God help anyone who tried to stop me. I turned my back on Kowalski and took a step toward the holding cell, but a hand landed on my shoulder. It was heavy and smelled of expensive cologne. I did not have to look to know it was Brad. Augustus, please be reasonable, Brad said, his voice smooth like oil on water. I know how this looks. It breaks my heart, too. But you have to understand the context. We found crystal meth in his gym bag. When I tried to take it away, he lunged at me. He had a tire iron, Augustus. He was going to kill me. I had to subdue him. It was self-defense. I shrugged his hand off my shoulder as if it were a poisonous spider. I turned slowly to face him. He was standing there, with that practiced look of pained benevolence the grieving stepfather forced into a difficult position. He touched his cheek where a microscopic scratch barely broke the skin. A single drop of dried blood sat there like a prop. Self-defense, I repeated, my voice flat. You are 6'2" and built like a linebacker. Leo is 14. He weighs 120 pounds soaking wet. You said he came at you with a tire iron. He did, Brad insisted, nodding earnestly at Kowalski, who was nodding along like a bobblehead. He was swinging wild. He was out of his mind. Then why are you not bleeding, Brad? I asked, stepping into his personal space. If a boy swings a tire iron at you, he does not miss your entire body. He breaks an arm. He cracks a rib. But look at you. Your polo shirt is not even wrinkled. Your knuckles are not bruised. But my grandson's face looks like raw meat. I pointed a shaking finger at the cell where Leo was rocking back and forth. That is not restraint. That is a beating. You did not subdue him. You punished him. Kowalski stepped out from behind the desk, placing himself between me and Brad. That is enough, Mr. King. Mr. Sterling has been nothing but cooperative. We found the baggie in the kid's pocket just like he said. We have probable cause. You have nothing, I snapped, turning my glare on the sergeant. Did you field test the substance? Did you log it into evidence? Did you read him his rights before or after you let this man assault him in your lobby? Because I see a minor being held without legal counsel and without medical attention for injuries sustained during an altercation with an adult male who is currently free to leave. Under Section 305 of the Family Code, a minor cannot be detained in a secure facility unless they pose an immediate physical danger to themselves or others. He is sitting on a bench crying. The only danger in this room is me if you do not open that door. Brad sighed, shaking his head theatrically. See, Sergeant, this is what we deal with. Denial. It runs in the family. Augustus he is old. He does not understand the modern drug crisis. Kowalski smirked. Look, Mr. King. I respect your service, but you are retired. Things work differently now. We are holding him until his legal guardian arrives. That is the mother. Not you. Procedural error, I said, cutting him off, my voice slicing through the air like a blade. In cases of alleged domestic violence where the accuser lives in the same home, the minor must be separated from the accuser immediately. You are keeping the victim in the same room as his abuser. That is a violation of his civil rights and a massive liability for this precinct. If you do not release him to my custody for immediate medical transport, I will have a judge wake you up in an hour with a habeas corpus writ, and I will name you personally in the civil rights lawsuit. Do you want to lose your pension over a favor to a real estate agent? Kowalski hesitated. He looked at Brad, then at the phone, then at me. He saw the truth in my eyes. I was not bluffing. I never bluffed. Fine, Kowalski grunted, reaching for the keys on his belt. But the mother is on her way. She decides where he goes. Open the door, I commanded. Now. The heavy metal doors swung open again, letting in a gust of cold night air. I turned, my relief palpable. Rachel. My daughter. My little girl. She looked frantic. Her coat was buttoned wrong. Her hair was a mess. She was pale, her eyes wide with panic as she scanned the room. I stepped back, creating a clear path between her and the holding cell. I waited for the scream. I waited for the mother lion to come out. I waited for her to see her son battered and bleeding and tear this station apart to get to him. I expected her to demand answers, to threaten the sergeant, to fall to her knees, weeping at the sight of her broken boy. But she did not look at the cell. She did not even look at me. She ran straight to him. She ran to Brad. "Oh God, honey, are you okay?" she cried, her voice high and trembling. She threw her arms around his neck, burying her face in his chest. She pulled back her hands, shaking as she touched his face, examining the microscopic scratch on his cheek with the intensity of a surgeon. "I am so sorry. I am so sorry I took so long." I stood frozen, my hand still pointing toward the cell where Leo was watching. He was watching his mother comfort the man who had beaten him. He did not say a word. He did not call out to her. He just slumped against the cinder block wall, the light dying in his one good eye, as if he had expected this all along. "Rachel," I said, my voice hoarse. "Rachel, look at your son." She spun around, but her eyes were not filled with concern. They were filled with fury, and it was directed entirely at the boy in the cage. "Leo! How could you?" she screamed. "Look at what you have done!" "Brad has given you everything. He gave you a home. He pays for your private school. He tries so hard with you. And this is how you thank him. By attacking him. By bringing drugs into our house." "Mom, I didn't..." Leo croaked, his voice thick with blood and tears. "He planted it. He hit me first. Mom, please look at me." "Stop lying," she shrieked, her voice shrill and hysterical. "Just stop it. You are a liar, Leo. You have been lying for months. Stealing money, skipping class, and now this. Violence, you are completely out of control." She turned back to Brad, clutching his hand as if he were the victim clinging to him like a lifeline. "I do not know what to do with him anymore, Brad. You were right. We cannot handle him. He needs help. Serious help." I felt a physical pain in my chest, sharper than any bullet wound I had ever seen. This was not just blindness. This was total indoctrination. She did not see her son. She saw the monster Brad had painted for her. She did not see the abuser standing next to her. She saw a saint she was failing. "Rachel, listen to me." I stepped forward, blocking her view of Brad, forcing her to look at me. "Leo has a broken nose. He has bruised ribs. He needs a doctor. Brad does not have a mark on him. Use your eyes. Use your brain." She looked at me with cold, dead eyes. "Stay out of this, Dad. You do not live with us. You do not know what it is like. You do not see what he is like when the doors are closed. He breaks things. He screams. Brad is a saint for putting up with him. If Brad had to defend himself, then Leo gave him no choice." Brad wrapped his arm around her waist, pulling her close, smirking at me over her shoulder. "It is okay, babe," he said softly, his voice dripping with fake sympathy. "We will get through this. We just need to do what is best for Leo, even if it is hard." I looked at my daughter, the woman I had raised to be strong, to be smart, to be kind, and I realized she was gone. The woman standing before me was a stranger, hollowed out and filled with Brad's lies, and that meant Leo had no one left but me. "Sergeant, release the boy." I did not ask. I ordered. Kowalski looked at the clock, then at the liability I represented. He unlocked the cage. The sound of the heavy latch sliding back echoed like a gunshot in the small room. Leo stumbled out. He could barely walk. He favored his left leg and kept his head down as if the light hurt him. I stepped forward, ignoring Rachel and Brad. I put my hand on Leo's shoulder. He flinched, a reflex of a boy who had learned to expect pain, but when he realized it was me, he leaned into my side. He smelled of fear and dried blood. I am taking him to St. Mary's Hospital, I announced, guiding him toward the exit. I will have a forensic nurse document these injuries, and then we will see who the district attorney wants to charge. No, you are not. Rachel blocked my path. She stood between me and the door, her arms crossed, her face set in a mask of stubborn denial. He is my son, Dad. I have full custody. You have no rights here. He is coming home with us. We will call our family doctor. We do not need you turning this into a circus. I looked at her, incredulous. Rachel, he has a concussion. He needs a scan. If you take him home and he has a brain bleed and dies, that is manslaughter. Do you understand that? He is fine, Brad interjected, stepping up beside her, placing a possessive hand on her shoulder. He is tough. Aren't you, Sport? We just need to get him home, get him cleaned up, and have a long talk about choices. Leo looked up at me, his one good eye wide with terror. He gripped my shirt. Grandpa, please, he whispered. Do not let them take me. I looked at Kowalski. Sergeant, the boy is expressing fear for his safety. Under the law, you can authorize an emergency protective hold. Kowalski shook his head, retreating behind his desk, washing his hands of the mess. Custody order is clear, Mr. King. Unless you have a court order signed by a judge tonight, she is the mother. It is a civil matter now. Get out of my station. The law. I had spent 40 years serving it, believing in it. But in that moment, the law was just a weapon they were using to crush my grandson. Rachel grabbed Leo's arm. Her grip was hard, punishing. Come on, Leo, stop making a scene. She dragged him away from me. I took a step to follow, but Brad stepped in my way, his chest bumping mine. He leaned in close so only I could hear him. Go home, old man. You lost. If you come near my house again, I will bury you. He turned and walked away. I followed them out to the parking lot, powerless. I watched as they shoved Leo into the back seat of Brad's black SUV. It looked like a hearse. Leo did not fight. He had no fight left. Brad got in the driver's seat. Rachel got in the passenger side. She did not look back at me. She did not look back at the father who had paid for her college, who had walked her down the aisle, who had held her when her mother died. She only looked at Brad. The engine purred to life. As the car began to back out, the rear window rolled up slowly. Leo pressed his face against the glass. The bruise on his eye was already turning black. He did not cry. He just looked at me. His lips moved silently, framing 4 words that would haunt me for the rest of my life. Grandpa, don't leave me. Then the window closed. The tint turned the glass black, erasing him from my sight. I stood alone in the cold precinct parking lot, watching the red taillights fade into the darkness, realizing that my grandson was being driven back to hell by the people who were supposed to protect him. And I had let it happen. I did not sleep that night. I sat at my kitchen table watching the sun bleed into the sky, drinking coffee that tasted like ash. At 8 o'clock, I got back in my truck. I drove to the house I had helped pay for the Colonial on Elm Street, with the big oak tree in the front yard. The house where I had built the back deck with my own hands so Leo would have a place to sit and do his homework. When I pulled into the driveway, the house looked like a fortress. The blinds were drawn tight against the morning light. Brad's black SUV was gone, but Rachel's sedan was parked in the garage. I walked up the path, my boots heavy on the concrete. I raised my hand to knock, but stopped. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my key, the spare key Rachel had given me the day they moved in. I slid it into the lock. It stopped halfway. It did not turn. I tried again, wiggling it, thinking maybe it was just stuck. But it was not stuck. It was the wrong key. They had changed the locks. In the 6 hours since I watched them drive away from the police station, they had called a locksmith. That takes planning. That takes intent. I pounded on the door, the wood rattling in the frame. Rachel, open this door. I know you are in there. I just want to see Leo. I just want to know he is safe. Silence. No movement behind the curtains. No footsteps on the hardwood floors. Just the dead weight of a house that had turned its back on me. Then I heard the crunch of gravel behind me. A police cruiser rolled to a stop at the end of the driveway, blocking my truck. It was not Kowalski. It was Officer Miller, a young kid I had seen around town, mostly writing parking tickets. He got out of the car, adjusting his belt, looking nervous. He kept his hand resting near his holster, as if he expected me to draw on him. "Mr. King, step away from the door," Miller called out, his voice cracking slightly. I turned slowly, my hands visible. "Miller, what is this?" "I have some paperwork for you, sir. You need to come down here and accept service." I walked down the driveway. Miller reached into his car and pulled out a thick sheaf of papers stapled together. The top page was bright yellow, a temporary restraining order, ex parte. That meant they had gone to a judge first thing in the morning without me present, without a chance for me to defend myself. I scanned the affidavit attached to the order. My eyes burned as I read the lies printed in black and white. Augustus King is a violent individual with a history of aggression. He threatened Mr. Sterling with a firearm outside the police precinct. He has exhibited signs of early-onset dementia and paranoia. He poses an immediate threat to the safety and psychological well-being of the minor child, Leo. A firearm. I had never taken my gun out of the lockbox, but Brad knew I had it. He knew I carried it. He had twisted my preparedness into a threat. And the dementia claim. That was the knife in the back. They were using my age to discredit me, to paint me as a senile old man waving a gun around a danger to the grandson I would die to protect. "This is a lie, Miller," I said, shaking the papers at him. "Every word of this is perjury. I never threatened anyone." "That is for the judge to decide," Sir Miller said, stepping back, his face hard. "Right now you are in violation of a court order by being within 500 feet of this property. You need to leave immediately, or I will have to place you under arrest." I looked at the house one last time. I saw a curtain twitch in the upstairs window. Rachel's bedroom. She was watching. She was watching the police serve her father with a restraining order. She was letting them paint me as a monster to protect the monster she married. I got back in my truck. I tossed the restraining order onto the passenger seat. It was not just a piece of paper. It was a declaration of war. They thought this would stop me. They thought a piece of paper and a changed lock would keep me away. They had no idea. They had just given me the motive I needed to take the gloves off. I put the truck in gear and drove away, leaving the silence of that house behind me. But I was not going home to sulk. I was going to the bank. I drove past the turn for my street. I did not go home to lick my wounds. I did not go home to cry over the yellow piece of paper on my passenger seat. I went to the money. Because in my 30 years as a prosecutor, I learned one universal truth. Violence is loud, but greed is the silent killer. Violence is the distraction. Money is the motive. I pulled into First National Bank. The brick building stood on the corner of 4th and Main, a monument to stability in a town that was falling apart. I walked into the lobby with the same stride I used to enter a courtroom. I did not wait in line. I walked straight to the glass-walled office of the branch manager. Robert looked up from his computer, startled. He knew me. He knew I had deposited a check every month for 14 years into account 8940, Leo's college fund. my life savings, my promise to my grandson that he would have choices I never had. Mr. King Robert said, standing up too quickly, his chair scraping against the floor mat. What can I do for you? I want to see the activity on Leo's trust, I said, sitting down without shaking his hand. I want to freeze it. I suspect fraudulent activity. Robert went pale. He adjusted his tie, his fingers trembling. He typed something into his keyboard, his eyes darting back and forth. He did not look at me. He looked at the screen as if it were a bomb. Mr. King, he said, his voice thin and reedy, I cannot freeze the account. Why not? I asked, my voice low. Because there is nothing to freeze. The balance is zero. The air left the room. Zero. $150,000. Gone. Years of overtime. Years of missed vacations. Gone. When I asked, the word came out like a growl. Yesterday morning, Robert whispered, your daughter came in. She had the custody papers. She had the death certificate for your late wife showing she was the successor trustee. She said it was for an emergency medical facility for Leo. She liquidated the securities. She took a cashier's check for the full amount. Show me the check, I demanded. He turned the monitor. I saw the digital scan of the check. It was made out to Rachel Sterling. But on the back, under her endorsement, was a second signature for deposit only into a joint account. Bradford Sterling. I stared at the signature. The loops were arrogant. The ink was heavy. It all clicked into place like the tumblers of a safe. The abuse. The drugs planted in the gym bag. The restraining order. It was not just about a stepfather who hated his stepson. It was a heist. They needed Leo gone. They needed him in rehab or in juvenile detention or on the streets. As long as he was in the house, he was a liability. He was a witness. But if he was a troubled teen sent away for his own good, they could drain his future to pay for their present. They had labeled him an addict to discredit him so no one would listen when he screamed that they were stealing his life. Brad had not just beaten a boy. He had beaten a bank account pinata. This was not a family dispute. This was grand larceny. This was a conspiracy. I stood up. I did not yell. I did not threaten the banker. He was just a tool, just like the police officer had been a tool. Print it, I said. Print everything. I walked out of the bank with a sheaf of warm papers in my hand. The sun was shining, but the world looked gray. They had taken his safety. They had taken his reputation. And now they had taken his future. They thought they had won. They thought they had stripped him of everything. But they forgot one thing. They forgot he had a grandfather who knew exactly how to hunt monsters. I got into my truck and locked the doors. I checked the time. It was not even noon. I did not drive home. I drove toward the city skyline in the distance. I was done playing defense. It was time to call in the Sharks. I parked my truck between a Porsche and a Mercedes in the underground garage of the Zenith Tower. The building was glass and steel, cold and sharp, just like the woman who owned the top 3 floors. Victoria Graves. The press called her the Ice Queen. Defense attorneys called her a nightmare. I called her the best student I ever failed to teach mercy to. I walked past the receptionist who looked like a model and terrified of losing her job. I did not have an appointment. I did not need one. I pushed open the double mahogany doors at the end of the hall. Victoria was standing by the floor-to-ceiling window looking out over the city she essentially owned. She did not turn around when I entered. "Hello, Gus," she said, her voice cool and crisp like a winter morning. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" "It has been 5 years. You did not come for tea." I walked to the leather chair opposite her desk and sat down. I placed the stack of bank documents on the glass surface. The sound was heavy. "I need to kill a man, Victoria. Not with a gun. with paper. I need to strip him to the bone. I need him to wish he was dead before I am done with him." She turned then. She was 45 but looked 30. Her suit cost more than my truck. Her eyes were gray and completely void of warmth. She walked to the desk and picked up the papers. She scanned them, her expression unreadable. "Bradford Sterling," she said. The name rolled off her tongue with a hint of distaste. The town saint. The man who donates to the police ball and kisses babies. You are aiming high, Gus. He is insulated. He has friends in the district attorney's office. He has friends in the mayor's office. "He beat my grandson," I said, my voice low and steady. "He planted drugs on him. He stole my life savings. And he brainwashed my daughter." Victoria looked at me. For a second, the ice cracked. Just a hairline fracture. She respected power, and she respected vengeance. She sat down, crossing her legs. "I do not do pro bono, Gus. You know my rates." I reached into my pocket and pulled out a check. It was for $10,000, the rest of my checking account. "This is a retainer," I said. "There is more where that came from. I have properties. I have assets. I will sell everything." She pushed the check back across the desk. "Keep your money. I do not want it." I frowned. "Then why take the case?" She smiled. It was not a nice smile. It was the smile of a shark sensing blood in the water. "Because Bradford Sterling tried to buy me a drink at a gala last month. He put his hand on my waist and told me I was too pretty to be so serious. He thinks he is untouchable. He thinks he owns this city. I have been waiting for a reason to show him that he is just a tenant. And you just gave me the eviction notice." She opened a drawer and pulled out a fresh legal pad. "Sit down, Gus. Tell me everything. And do not leave out the ugly parts. If we are going to hunt a monster, we need to be monsters too." Victoria sat behind her desk, her fingers flying across a keyboard that looked more like a cockpit control panel than a computer. She had been silent for 10 minutes. I sat opposite her, watching the city lights flicker on below us. The silence was not empty. It was heavy with the weight of information being unearthed. She stopped typing abruptly. The sudden lack of sound was almost louder than the typing. She spun her monitor around. "Look at this," she said, her voice devoid of emotion. I leaned forward. I saw a timeline. It was a digital dossier of Bradford Sterling. It was full of awards, civic commendations, and property deeds. But the timeline had a hard edge. It started exactly 5 years ago. "I do not see it," I said, squinting at the screen. "Exactly," Victoria replied. "You do not see it because it is not there. Look at the dates, Gus. Every single record associated with Bradford Sterling begins in 2019. His driver's license, his voter registration, his first bank account, his first credit card." I looked closer. She was right. There was nothing before that date. No student loans, no high school yearbook photos, no employment history, no tax returns. He popped into existence 5 years ago, fully formed, with a bank account full of cash and a smile full of teeth, Victoria said, leaning back in her chair. "Before that date, Bradford Sterling did not exist. He is a ghost," I whispered, the realization settling in my gut like cold lead. "He is a ghost," Victoria confirmed. "In this day and age, you cannot live 35 years without leaving a digital footprint. You buy coffee, you get a parking ticket, you sign a lease. Brad has none of that prior to his arrival in this town. That means one of two things. Either he was in a coma for 3 decades, or Bradford Sterling is a fiction. A suit he put on because the man he used to be had to disappear." I thought about the way he stood in the police station, the way he manipulated the sergeant, the way he turned my daughter against her own flesh and blood. That was not the behavior of a local businessman. That was the behavior of a predator who had honed his craft. "He is running from something," I said. "Or someone," Victoria added. People do not erase their past unless it is chasing them. He has a clean slate here, but clean slates are expensive, and they are fragile. She tapped a key and a printer whirred to life in the corner. I am going to run a deep background check through my private investigator, Victoria said, standing up and walking to the printer. We are going to find out who he was before he decided to be the town saint. Because ghosts always leave a trail, Gus. You just have to know where to look for the graves. She handed me the paper. It was a single sheet with Brad's face on it. Underneath it simply said, name unknown, origin unknown, status fraudulent. We are not just dealing with a bad stepfather, Victoria said, her eyes locking onto mine. We are dealing with a professional. He erased himself. Now we are going to draw him back in. My phone vibrated against the mahogany desk. It was a single short buzz, but in the silence of the office it sounded like a gunshot. I looked at the screen. It was Rachel. My heart leaped with a foolish surge of hope. Maybe she had woken up. Maybe she had seen the bruises on her son's face and realized she was sleeping next to a monster. I opened the message. The hope died instantly, replaced by a cold dread that settled in the marrow of my bones. Dad, please stop causing trouble. We have made a difficult decision as a family. Leo has been admitted to a residential treatment facility for his addiction and behavioral issues. It is a long-term program. He is safe and he is getting the help he needs. Do not try to contact him. It is better this way. Please respect our privacy. I stared at the words. Residential treatment facility. That was the polite term. The real term was a warehouse for unwanted children. They had shipped him off. They had erased him. I hit the call button. It rang once. Twice. Then it went straight to voicemail. I called again. This time it did not even ring. She had blocked me. She had cut the cord not just between us, but between me and the only person in this world I had left to protect. I looked at Victoria. She had seen my face change. She knew. They moved him, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. They sent him away. Victoria reached for her phone. We can file an emergency motion for disclosure. We can force her to tell us where he is. That will take days, I said, standing up. Days we do not have. If Brad Sterling is who we think he is, he knows how to hide things. If Leo is in a facility, he will be on a blackout period. No calls, no visitors. By the time a judge signs an order, they could move him again. Or worse. I did not wait for her permission. I walked out of the office and pulled out a burner phone I kept in my glove box. A relic from a different life. I dialed a number I had not used in 10 years. Jimmy picked up on the second ring. He was a former NSA analyst who owed me his freedom. I had prosecuted a case where he was a minor player, and I had cut him a deal that kept him out of federal prison. He owed me a life. Gus, he said, his voice wary. I thought you were retired. I need a ping, Jimmy. Right now. I gave him Leo's cell number. Gus, you know I cannot do that without a warrant. It is a felony. It is my grandson, Jimmy. He has been kidnapped. There was a pause on the line. I heard the clicking of keys. Jimmy did not ask questions. He knew that if Augustus King used the word kidnapped, it was not hyperbole. I am tracing the signal now, Jimmy said. It is faint. The battery is low or the reception is terrible. Hang on. I waited in the parking garage, the silence pressing in on me. I gripped the steering wheel, watching the seconds tick by on the dashboard clock. Every second was another mile between me and Leo. Every second was another moment he was alone in the dark, terrified, thinking his grandfather had abandoned him. Got him, Jimmy said. The signal is stationary. It is way out in the sticks, Gus. Up in the mountains near the state line. Give me the coordinates. He read them out. I punched them into my GPS. The map zoomed out, crossing county lines, leaving the city far behind, entering the dense green void of the national forest. The red pin dropped on a location that had no street view, no nearby gas stations, nothing but a single winding dirt road leading to a compound isolated from the rest of the world. The name on the GPS tag read, Serenity Hills Wilderness Reformatory, Serenity Hills. Serenity. The name sounded peaceful. It sounded like a spa. But I knew better. I knew exactly what kind of place operated in the dead zones where cell service died, and the law did not look too closely. It was not a school. It was a black site for children. It was a place where they broke you down until there was nothing left but obedience. "Thanks, Jimmy," I said and hung up. I threw the phone onto the passenger seat. I started the engine. The GPS said it was a 4-hour drive. I could make it in 3. They thought they had hidden him. They thought they had buried him in the woods where no one would hear him scream. They were wrong. They had just given me a map. I pulled my truck onto the shoulder of the winding mountain road, a mile from the entrance of Serenity Hills. I killed the lights, but kept the engine running. I was not going in blind. I needed to know exactly what kind of fortress I was about to breach. I dialed Frank Russo. Frank was former FBI Organized Crime Division, a man who had spent 30 years listening to wiretaps and tracking money laundering through shell companies. He was the only man I knew who was more cynical than me. "Talk to me, Frank," I said, watching the dark tree line. "It is worse than we thought," Gus Frank said, his voice sounding tinny through the speaker. "Serenity Hills is not a rehab center. It is a behavior modification camp operating under a religious exemption loophole. That means no state inspections, no licensing requirements for the staff, no oversight." Define behavior modification. I asked, my grip tightening on the steering wheel. "They break them," Frank said flatly. "They call it attack therapy. Sleep deprivation, food rationing, isolation boxes. They force the kids to scream abuse at each other for hours until they break down. It is not therapy, Gus. It is psychological torture designed to turn rebellious teenagers into compliant zombies. They market it to desperate rich parents who want their problems to disappear." My stomach churned. I thought of Leo with his broken nose and bruised ribs, alone in the dark, surrounded by strangers who were paid to hurt him. "Is it secure?" I asked. "Like a Supermax," Frank replied. "Razor wire, motion sensors. The guards are private contractors, mostly ex-military, who got kicked out for being too aggressive. But that is not the worst part, Gus. I followed the money. I listened the silence of the forest pressing against the glass. The tuition is $6,000 a month, Frank continued. But the facility pays a referral fee to educational consultants who recommend it. It is a kickback scheme. I hacked their vendor payments list about 10 minutes ago. There is a recurring payment scheduled for the first of every month. To who I asked, though I already felt the answer rising in my throat like bile. Sterling Real Estate Holdings, Frank said. Bradford Sterling. He is getting a $3,000 kickback for every month Leo stays in that hellhole. The rage that filled me then was cold and absolute. It was not just about getting Leo out of the house. It was not just about stealing the trust fund. Brad was monetizing my grandson's suffering. He had beaten the boy, framed him, and shipped him off to a torture camp, and he was charging a commission for it. He was selling Leo by the pound. This is human trafficking, I said, my voice barely a whisper. Technically, it is referral fraud and child endangerment, Frank corrected ever the agent. But yeah, he sold the kid Gus. Send me the ledger, I said. Send me everything. I hung up the phone. I looked up the dark road toward the facility. I touched the lockbox next to my seat. I had come here to rescue a boy. But now I knew I was walking into a business transaction. Brad thought he had made a smart deal. He thought he had turned a profit on a problem. He was about to find out that the cost of doing business with Augustus King was higher than he could ever afford to pay. I put the truck in gear and turned off the headlights. I was going in dark. I stood in Victoria's office staring at the city skyline while the printer hummed in the corner. We had the location of the boy, and we had the financial motive, but we needed the man. We needed to know who was wearing the skin of Bradford Sterling. The door opened, and Frank Russo walked in. He did not look like a man who had slept. He looked like a man who had been digging through trash for 3 days. He was holding a manila folder like it was the nuclear codes. He made a mistake, Frank said, tossing the folder onto Victoria's glass desk. It was small, almost invisible, but he got arrogant. Victoria leaned forward, her eyes sharp. "What did you find?" Frank pulled out a photograph of a vintage Mustang, a '67 Fastback. Beautiful car. He restored this 3 years ago, Frank explained. Sold it for 80 grand cash to a collector in a private sale. Kept it off the books mostly. But restoration guys are sentimental. They leave pieces of themselves in the work. I tracked down the buyer. Told him I was investigating a title fraud. He let me toss the car. He tapped the photo. I pulled the door panels off. On the inside of the metal frame where you have to reach in blindly to grease the window track, I found it. A perfect right thumbprint preserved in axle grease. He never wiped it because he never thought anyone would look inside the door of a car he sold years ago. And Victoria asked, the tension in the room tightening like a wire. Frank pulled a second photo out of the folder. It was a mugshot. The man in the picture was younger. His hair was thinner, and he had a mustache that looked ridiculous. But the eyes were the same. Those cold, dead shark eyes that I had seen in the police station. "Matches 100%, Frank said. "Meet Jerome Kincaid." I looked at the face of the man who was destroying my family. Jerome Kincaid. The name sounded cheap. It sounded like a lie. "Who is he?" I asked. Victoria was already reading from the file Frank had compiled. Wanted in Nevada and Arizona, she read, her voice flat. Romance scams, identity theft, grand larceny. He targets widows and divorcees, women with assets and low self-esteem. He marries them, drains their accounts, and then vanishes. He does not just vanish, Frank added grimly. In Phoenix, his wife fell down a flight of stairs 2 days after she signed a new life insurance policy. In Reno, his fiancée drowned in a boating accident. He was never charged because the bodies were cremated or the evidence was circumstantial. But he is a suspect in 2 homicides, Gus. The room went cold. My daughter was not just married to a thief. She was sleeping next to a serial killer who was biding his time. He had separated her from her son. He had isolated her from her father. He had liquidated her assets. The pattern was complete. Rachel was the next accident waiting to happen. "We have to get him," I said, my voice trembling with a rage I had never felt before. "Not for the money, not for the beatings, for Rachel. If we do not stop him, he is going to kill her." Victoria looked at me, her face pale. "We have the print, Gus. We know who he is. But if we go to the police now, he might run. If he smells heat, he will disappear again, and he might take his last payday with him." I looked at the mugshot of Jerome Kincaid. "He is not going to run," I said, "because he thinks he has already won. He thinks he is untouchable. We are going to let him believe that for exactly 24 more hours. And then we are going to introduce Jerome to the entire world." I sat in the leather chair, the file heavy in my hands like a tombstone. The name on the tab read Elizabeth Moore. She was a 55-year-old widow in Scottsdale, Arizona, with a net worth of $4 million. She met a charming real estate consultant named Jerome Kincaid at a charity auction in 2012. He was attentive. He was charismatic. He was everything a lonely woman thought she needed. I flipped the page. The timeline was terrifyingly efficient. They were married in 3 months. He moved into her estate. He fired her longtime housekeeper. He changed the locks. He convinced her that her children were only interested in her money and slowly, systematically cut them out of her life. It was a playbook, a script he was running line by line with my daughter right now. Then came the police report, dated November 14th, 2012. A call at midnight. A frantic husband reporting a fall. Elizabeth had tumbled down the main staircase. Broken neck. Instant death. The medical examiner noted bruising on her wrists, consistent with a fall, but also consistent with being grabbed. But Jerome had an answer for everything. He said he tried to catch her. He said he tried to save her. I looked at the crime scene photos. The sprawling marble staircase. The body at the bottom. It looked like an accident. It always looks like an accident when there is only one witness and he stands to inherit everything. The next document was the probate record. Elizabeth had updated her will 2 weeks before she died. She left everything to her devoted husband, Jerome Kincaid. The children got nothing. He liquidated the estate in 30 days. The house, the jewelry, the stocks. He turned a life into cash and walked away, leaving a family shattered and a woman in an urn. I closed the folder, my hands shaking. This was not just fraud. This was a slaughter. He is doing it again, I whispered, the realization settling over me like a shroud. The timeline matches perfectly. He has isolated Rachel. He has turned her against me. He got rid of Leo because Leo was a complication in the house. Now it is just the two of them alone in that big house with the new locks. Victoria looked at me, her face grim. He has drained the accounts, Victoria said softly. The trust fund is gone. The house is mortgaged to the hilt. There is no more money to squeeze out of her, Gus. That means she is no longer an asset. I said, my voice dead. She is a liability. She is the only person who can tie him to the theft. Once the money is secure, he does not need a wife. He needs a widower's sympathy. I stood up, knocking the chair back. The urgency was physical now, a tightness in my chest that made it hard to breathe. We were not investigating a crime anymore. We were watching a countdown. He is going to kill her, I said. He has stripped the carcass, and now he is going to burn the evidence. We have to stop him. Not tomorrow. Not next week. We have to stop him before Rachel takes a trip down the stairs. I waited for Sergeant Kowalski in the alley behind the 4th precinct. It was the end of the swing shift and the air was thick with mist. I knew his routine. I knew he liked to smoke a cigarette by his car before driving home to his wife and 2 daughters. I leaned against the brick wall, the dossier on Jerome Kincaid tucked under my arm like a weapon. The back door swung open and Kowalski stepped out. He looked tired. He unbuttoned his collar and lit a cigarette, the flame illuminating a face that had seen too much petty crime and not enough true evil. He took a drag and then he saw me. He froze, his hand dropping to his belt. Mr. King, he said, his voice tight. You are violating the restraining order. If I call it in, I have to arrest you. I did not move. I did not raise my voice. I stepped into the circle of light cast by the street lamp. I am not here to harass you, Sergeant, I said. I am here to give you a chance. A chance to be the cop you thought you were when you pinned that badge on for the first time. I tossed the manila envelope onto the hood of his cruiser. It slid across the wet metal and stopped right in front of him. What is this? He asked, eyeing the envelope warily. It is a mirror, I said. Open it. He hesitated, then crushed his cigarette under his boot. He picked up the envelope and pulled out the contents. The first thing he saw was the mugshot of Jerome Kincaid. He frowned, looking closely at the face, then up at me. That is Sterling, he whispered. But he looks younger. Different hair. Keep looking, I said. He flipped the page. He saw the crime scene photos from Scottsdale, the twisted body of Elizabeth Moore at the bottom of the marble staircase, the bruising on her wrists, the autopsy report that listed the cause of death as a broken neck, but noted inconsistent injuries. He is not a real estate developer, Sergeant. I said, my voice low and hard. His name is Jerome Kincaid. He is a grifter, a con artist, and a suspect in 2 homicides. He finds women with money, he isolates them, he drains them, and then he kills them. Kowalski stared at the photo of the dead woman. His hands started to shake. The color drained from his face, leaving him looking gray and old. He told me the kid was dangerous, Kowalski muttered more to himself than to me. He said the boy was a threat to his mother. He said he was protecting her. He was clearing the board, I corrected him. He needed Leo gone so there would be no witnesses when he pushed Rachel down the stairs. And you helped him do it. You put a 14-year-old boy in a cage and handed him over to a monster. You let a killer walk out of your station with the next victim on his arm. Kowalski dropped the photos onto the hood of the car as if they burned him. He looked at me, and for the first time I saw fear in his eyes. Not fear of me. Fear of what he had done. I didn't know, he said, his voice cracking. I swear to God, Mr. King, I thought he was just a stepfather dealing with a junkie kid. He donated to the benevolent fund. He seemed like a good guy. Predators always do, I said, stepping closer. That is how they hunt. But now you know. You know what he is, and you know what he is going to do. My daughter is alone in that house with him right now. He has her money. He has her trust. The only thing left is the accident. Kowalski looked at the precinct door, then back at the photos. He swallowed hard. The conflict was written all over his face. The instinct to protect his pension versus the oath he swore to protect life. What do you want me to do? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. I cannot arrest him based on a file from 2012. I need probable cause. I do not need you to arrest him. Not yet, I said. I need you to look the other way. I am going to get my grandson back. And then I am going to set a trap. When I spring it, I need you to be ready. Not as a friend of Brad Sterling, but as a police officer who wants to wash the blood off his hands. Kowalski looked down at the dead woman in the photo again. He took a deep breath and nodded once. Tell me what you need, he said. I sat in the back of Frank Russo's surveillance van, the air thick with the smell of old electronics and coffee. The van was parked 3 blocks away from the house I had bought for my daughter, but on the small grainy monitor in front of us, we were right inside her garage. Frank had slipped onto the property that morning, disguised as a utility worker checking gas meters. He had planted a pinhole camera and a high-gain microphone inside a dusty box of screws on the workbench, a workbench Brad never touched because manual labor was beneath him. The screen flickered. The timestamp read 10:45 p.m. The garage door opened and the motion sensor tripped. Bradford Sterling walked into the frame. He looked different than he did in public. The charm was gone. His shoulders were slumped, not in fatigue, but in the relaxed posture of a predator who has finished hunting for the day. He pulled a pack of cigarettes from his pocket and lit one, the smoke curling up toward the camera lens like a gray snake. He pulled out a burner phone. I leaned in, my eyes burning as I watched him dial. He put the phone to his ear and waited. When he spoke, his voice was low, but the microphone picked it up with crystal clarity. It is me, he said, taking a long drag. Yeah, the kid is gone. We shipped him off yesterday. No, he will not be a problem. They keep them locked down tight up there. He laughed. It was a cold, ugly sound that made my skin crawl. Stop worrying. She is a mess. She has been crying in her room all day thinking she failed her son. It is pathetic, really. She is so desperate for me to fix it, she will sign anything I put in front of her. I watched my hands clench into fists on my knees. I wanted to reach through the screen and choke the life out of him, but I forced myself to listen. I needed every word. Yeah, the papers are ready. Brad continued, flicking ash onto the concrete floor of my daughter's home. We are doing the refinance tomorrow morning. $500,000 cash out. As soon as the wire hits the offshore account, I am gone. No, I am not going to leave a note. Why would I? She served her purpose. He paused, listening to the person on the other end. Then he grinned a feral expression that revealed the true face of Jerome Kincaid. "She is just a cash cow," he said, his voice dripping with contempt. "A stupid, lonely cash cow. I milked her dry, and now it is time to take the beef to the slaughterhouse. I will meet you in Mexico on Friday. Get the boat ready." He hung up and crushed the cigarette under his heel. He stood there for a moment, admiring his reflection in the window of his car. Then he turned and walked back into the house, back to the woman he planned to destroy. The screen went static as the lights in the garage went out. I sat in the darkness of the van, the silence ringing in my ears. Frank reached over and hit the save button. "We got him," Frank said quietly. "That is conspiracy to commit fraud and grand larceny. We have him on tape." I stared at the black screen. We had the evidence. We had the smoking gun. But hearing him talk about Rachel like livestock, hearing him plan his escape with $500,000 of her equity, ignited a fire in me that the law could not extinguish. He was not just going to prison. He was going to pay. But first I had to stop that signature. "Get me the judge," I told Frank. "We are waking him up." My phone lit up again in the darkness of the surveillance van. It was an unknown number. I almost ignored it, thinking it was another creditor calling about the debts Brad had racked up, but something primal told me to answer. It was a woman's voice, whispering, hurried and terrified. "Is this Augustus King?" I did not recognize the voice. "I am calling from Serenity Hills," she said. "I am the night nurse. You need to come. You need to come right now." My blood froze. What happened? Is he alive? He tried to run, the nurse whispered, her voice shaking so hard I could barely understand her. 2 hours ago. He made it to the perimeter fence, but the private contractors caught him. They beat him bad, Mr. King. Worse than before. But that is not why I am calling. They put him in the box. The box. The word hung in the air like a death sentence. Frank had told me about it during his briefing. A modified metal shipping container buried halfway in the ground, used for extreme solitary confinement. No light, no ventilation. In the mountain heat during the day, it was an oven. At night, it was a freezer. It was a torture chamber designed to break the human mind. "He is hurt," she continued, a sob breaking through her whisper. "He is coughing up blood." I tried to give him water, but the director stopped me. He said Leo stays in there for 48 hours. No food. No water. No medical attention. To break his spirit, he said. "He won't last 48 hours, Mr. King. His breathing is shallow and his skin is cold. He is going into shock. If you do not get him out tonight, he is going to die in that box." The line went dead. She had risked her job, maybe her life, to make that call. I looked at Frank. He had heard enough to know the situation had shifted tectonically. We were no longer building a fraud case. We were running a rescue op. "Victoria says we need a warrant." Frank said, his voice steady but his eyes hard as flint. "She says if we go in without one, we lose the admissibility of anything we find. We could blow the whole case against Brad. If we kick down the doors, unlawful entry, kidnapping, assault with a deadly weapon. We go to prison, Gus." I looked at the blank screen of my phone. I saw Leo's face the way he looked in the back of that SUV, the bruise blooming on his eye. I saw the desperation in his gaze. I heard his plea. "Grandpa, do not leave me. To hell with the case," I said, my voice low and vibrating with a dangerous calm. "I do not care about the money anymore. I do not care about the fraud. I care about the boy dying in a metal box in the middle of the woods. The law takes too long, Frank. By the time a judge signs a piece of paper, Leo will be a corpse." I reached for the lockbox under my seat and spun the dial. The click of the latch opening was the only sound in the van. I pulled out my Sig Sauer and checked the chamber. The weight of the steel felt good. It felt honest. "I am going to get him, Frank. With or without a warrant. With or without the law. If they stand in my way, I will go through them. Frank looked at the gun, then at me. He saw the look in my eyes. It was not the look of a lawyer. It was the look of a man who had nothing left to lose. He did not try to stop me. He reached behind his seat and pulled out a shotgun, racking the slide with a sound that meant business. "You are not going alone, Gus," he said. "Let's go get the kid." I started the truck. The engine roared, a sound of pure fury. The law had failed my grandson. My daughter had failed him. I would not. I was done being a prosecutor. Tonight, I was just a grandfather, and I was coming for my boy. The tires of my truck chewed up the gravel driveway of Judge Lawrence Thorne's estate. It was a sprawling colonial in the wealthiest district, the kind of house built on political favors and quiet dinners. I did not park. I skidded to a halt on the lawn. Frank stayed in the truck, the engine idling like a restless beast. I marched up the steps and pounded on the heavy oak door. I did not knock. I hammered. Lights flickered on inside. The door swung open, revealing Larry Thorne in a silk robe, his hair disheveled, his face a mask of irritation that quickly turned to shock when he saw who was standing on his porch. "Augustus," he sputtered, clutching his robe. "It is 3 a.m. Have you lost your mind?" I pushed past him into the foyer. The house smelled of lemon polish and complacency. I did not apologize. I did not exchange pleasantries. I slammed a folder onto the antique entry table. "I need a warrant, Larry. Search and rescue. Serenity Hills Reformatory. Immediate execution. No knock." Larry looked at the folder, then at me. He rubbed his eyes. "Gus, you know I cannot do that. You are retired. You have no standing. And Serenity Hills is a donor to the Sheriff's Association. If you want a warrant, go through the DA in the morning. There will be no mourning for my grandson." I said, my voice vibrating with a frequency that made the crystal chandelier seem to tremble. I stepped into his personal space. I towered over him. I let him see the darkness I had carried for 40 years, the darkness I usually kept hidden behind suits and procedure. My grandson is locked in a metal box without water or medical care. I have a witness statement from a nurse on site stating he is in critical condition. I have a wiretap of his stepfather, plotting to let him rot so he can steal my daughter's equity. This is not a request, Larry. This is a demand. Larry stiffened, trying to summon the authority of the bench. "You are threatening a sitting judge, Augustus. I could have you arrested right now." "Call them," I dared him. "Call the police. And while we wait, I will call the press. I will play the recording of Bradford Sterling bragging about his fraud. And I will tell them that when I came to you for help to save a dying child, you worried about your donors. I will burn your reputation to the ground, Larry. I will make you the man who let a boy die to protect a kickback scheme. Do you want that to be your legacy?" He stared at me. He saw the desperation, but he also saw the truth. He knew I was not bluffing. He knew I would tear the world apart to get to Leo. He looked down at the folder. He opened it. He saw the photos of Leo's injuries. He saw the transcript of the nurse's call. His face softened. The bureaucrat fading, the human being finally surfacing. "God help us, Gus," he whispered. "If you are wrong about this, I am not wrong. Sign it." He turned and walked into his study. I followed him. He sat at his desk and pulled out a pen. His hand shook slightly as he scribbled his signature on the bottom of the warrant. He stamped it. The sound of the seal hitting the paper was the most beautiful sound I had heard in days. It was the sound of the law finally working for me instead of against me. He handed me the paper. "Go get him, Gus, and God have mercy on anyone who stands in your way." I snatched the warrant. I did not thank him. Mercy was not on the agenda tonight. I walked out of the house and climbed back into the truck. Frank looked at me and saw the paper in my hand. He grinned, racking the slide of his shotgun again. We had the shield. Now we were going to bring the sword. I floored the accelerator and we roared toward the mountains. The convoy of state troopers met us at the county line like a cavalry charge. 10 cruisers with light bars blazing, turning the dark mountain road into a strobe-lit runway of red and blue. I abandoned my truck and jumped into the lead SUV with Captain Miller. He was a stone-faced veteran who hated child abusers more than he hated paperwork. We hit the dirt access road doing 60, the suspension groaning as we bounced over ruts and rocks. The gate of Serenity Hills loomed ahead, a 12-foot chain-link barrier topped with razor wire meant to keep secrets in and justice out. It did not stand a chance. The lead tactical vehicle did not even tap the brakes. It rammed the gate with a sickening screech of tearing metal, sending the chain link flying into the courtyard. We poured into the compound before the dust had even settled. The sirens were deafening, a cacophony designed to shock and awe. Floodlights from the cruisers snapped on, bathing the rustic cabins and administrative buildings in a harsh, blinding white light that left no shadows for rats to hide in. Security guards scrambled out of the main building. These were the private contractors Frank had warned me about, men in tactical gear who looked more like mercenaries than counselors. They had batons and tasers and the arrogance of men who had never been told no. One of them, a giant with a buzz cut, stepped forward, raising a hand to stop us. "This is private property," he shouted, trying to be heard over the sirens. "You have no jurisdiction to—" He did not finish the sentence. 3 troopers hit him at once, a wall of gray uniforms tackling him into the dirt. I heard the zip ties cinch tight before he could even draw a breath. "State police, everyone on the ground now," the command echoed off the dormitory walls, amplified by a megaphone. I jumped out of the SUV. The air smelled of pine needles and exhaust fumes. Chaos erupted around me. Staff members were running out in pajamas, hands raised, facing the barrels of assault rifles. Kids were looking out of the barred windows of the cabins, their faces pale ghosts in the flashing lights. I did not care about the staff. I did not care about the procedure. I scanned the perimeter, looking for the nightmare the nurse had described. "Where is it?" I roared, grabbing the collar of a terrified administrator who had stumbled into my path. "Where is the box?" He stammered, eyes wide with terror, pointing toward the dense tree line at the edge of the property. "Back there. By the old generator." "Please, I was just following orders." I shoved him away and started running. Frank was right beside me, his shotgun held low but ready. We plunged into the woods, the beams of our flashlights cutting through the gloom like lasers. My lungs burned, my bad knee screamed in protest, but I felt none of it. I was fueled by a singular, terrifying purpose. We burst into a clearing, and there it was. A rusted metal shipping container half buried in the earth like a coffin. There were no windows, no ventilation shafts, just a heavy steel door secured with a padlock the size of my fist. It looked like something you would use to store hazardous waste, not a human child. "Frank, take the lock," I yelled, stepping back. Frank did not hesitate. He stepped up, leveled the shotgun, and pulled the trigger. The boom shattered the night silence ringing in my ears. Sparks showered down as the lock disintegrated. I kicked the door. It groaned on rusted hinges and swung open, revealing a black void that smelled of stale air, sweat, and the metallic tang of blood. "Leo!" I screamed into the darkness, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Leo, are you in there?" The heat inside the container hit me like a blast from a furnace, even though the mountain air outside was freezing. It was a stagnant, suffocating warmth that smelled of urine, sweat, and old fear. I swept my flashlight beam across the metal floor. The space was empty except for a bucket in the corner and a pile of filthy rags. "Leo." I saw him. He was curled into a ball in the furthest corner, pressed against the wall as if trying to merge with the steel. He was shivering violently. He raised his hands to shield his eyes from the light. His movements slow and uncoordinated, like a swimmer moving through molasses. "It is me, Leo. It is Grandpa." I dropped to my knees, ignoring the filth on the floor. I reached out and touched his arm. His skin was burning hot, feverish but clammy. He flinched, a full body spasm of terror, and let out a whimper that sounded more like a wounded animal than a 14-year-old boy. "No, please," he rasped, his voice a dry crackle. "I will be good, I promise." "Leo, look at me." I lowered the light so it was not blinding him. He blinked, his eyes crusted and sunken. Slowly, recognition dawned on his face. He stared at me as if I were a hallucination, born of heat stroke and desperation. He reached out a trembling hand and touched my face, his fingers tracing the line of my jaw, as if checking to see if I was real. "Grandpa," he whispered, "I am here, son. I am here." He let out a breath, a long, shuddering exhale that seemed to deflate his entire body. He slumped against me, his head falling onto my chest. "I knew you would come," he said softly. I told them my grandpa would come." That broke me. For 40 years I had been the hammer. I had stood over crime scenes that would make a normal man vomit and never blinked. I had sent men to death row without losing a night of sleep. I had buried my wife and stood stoic at her grave because I had to be strong for everyone else. But in that metal box, holding my broken grandson, smelling the blood on his shirt, and hearing the absolute faith in his voice, the dam finally broke. A single hot tear rolled down my cheek. It tracked through the dust on my face. I squeezed my eyes shut for 1 second, just 1 second, to acknowledge the pain. Then I buried it. I buried it deep where I kept all the other horrors, because Leo did not need me to cry. He needed me to carry him. I wrapped my arms around him. He felt terrifyingly light, as if the last few days had eaten him away from the inside out. I stood up, lifting him effortlessly. "I got you," I said, my voice rough. "We are leaving." I carried him out of the darkness and into the chaos of the flashing lights. The cool air hit us, and Leo shivered against me. Frank was standing by the door, his shotgun still raised, guarding us. He took one look at Leo's face and his jaw tightened until I thought his teeth would crack. "Get him to the medic," Frank said, his voice low and dangerous. "I will clear the path." I walked toward the ambulance, holding Leo tight against my chest, vowing that no one would ever touch him again. Not Brad. Not the guards. Not anyone. If they wanted him, they would have to kill me first. The fluorescent lights of the emergency room waiting area were humming a low-frequency buzz that felt like a drill in my temple. I sat in a plastic chair, my clothes covered in dust from the reformatory, my boots stained with mud. I did not care. I watched the double doors where they had taken Leo. Every time they swung open, my heart jumped. It had been 2 hours. 2 hours of silence. 2 hours of imagining the worst. Frank was outside dealing with the state police coordinating the evidence collection at Serenity Hills. I was alone with my thoughts, and they were dark enough to blot out the sun. Finally, the doors opened. A doctor stepped out wearing blue scrubs and a weary expression. He pulled his surgical mask down. He looked at me, then at the clipboard in his hand. "Mr. King," he asked. I stood up. My knees popped. "How is he, doctor?" "He is stable," the doctor said, but his eyes did not soften. "We got his fluids up. The dehydration was severe. His kidneys took a hit, but they will recover. The fever broke about 20 minutes ago. He is sleeping now." I let out a breath I did not know I was holding. "Thank God. Can I see him?" The doctor hesitated. He tapped the clipboard with his pen. "There is something else we need to discuss first. Something the scans picked up." My stomach dropped. "What is it?" "Brain damage." "No," the doctor said. "It is his ribs. He has 3 fractures on the left side. 2 of them are fresh, likely from the last 48 hours. But the third one is a callus fracture. It is about 6 weeks old. It healed poorly because it was never set. 6 weeks. I did the math. That was long before the incident at the police station. That was long before the so-called drug problem started. And that is not all, the doctor continued, his voice dropping to a professional whisper that barely concealed his disgust. When we were cleaning him up, we found scarring on his lower back. Circular burns, about the size of a dime. I stared at him, the room tilting slightly. Cigarette burns. Yes, the doctor confirmed. At least 5 of them. Some are months old. Some are newer. Mr. King, these are not accidental injuries. This boy has been systematically abused for a long time. I felt a cold numbness spread through my limbs. I thought about Brad standing in the garage smoking his cigarettes, flicking ash onto the floor. I thought about Rachel telling me Brad was a saint. I thought about Leo wearing hoodies in the summer, always flinching when someone moved too fast. He was branding him, I whispered, like cattle. This changes everything, the doctor said. I am required by law to report this to Child Protective Services. And the police. I looked the doctor in the eye. Report it, I said, my voice trembling with a rage so profound it felt like ice in my veins. Report every single mark. Take photos. Document every scar. Because I am going to use them to bury the man who did this. I walked past the doctor toward the room where my grandson lay sleeping. I needed to see him. I needed to see the map of pain that had been drawn on his body while I was sitting in my house thinking everything was fine. I needed to see it so I would never forget, so I would never show mercy, not to Brad, and not to the mother who let it happen. I stood outside room 304 like a sentinel. My arms were crossed over my chest and my back was against the door. I was not moving. I was not blinking. I was waiting. I knew they would come. People like Brad always return to the scene of the crime not out of guilt, but out of a need to control the narrative. He needed to make sure Leo kept his mouth shut. He needed to make sure the doctors bought the story of the troubled teen who ran away and got hurt. Then I heard them. The frantic click of heels on the linoleum. The heavy, aggressive tread of boots. Rachel came around the corner first. She looked wild. Her hair was flying, and her coat was open. She saw me and ran faster. "Where is he?" she screamed, her voice echoing in the quiet corridor. "Where is my son?" She tried to push past me, reaching for the door handle. I caught her by the shoulders. I did not shake her, but I held her firm. She was vibrating with adrenaline and panic. "You are not going in there, Rachel." "Let me go," she shrieked, struggling against my grip. "He is my son. I have a right to see him." Brad appeared behind her. He put his hands on her waist, pulling her back slightly, not to comfort her, but to assert ownership. He looked at me with cold calculation. He was not panicked. He was annoyed. "Get your hands off my wife, Augustus," he said, his voice low and threatening. "Step aside. We are taking Leo home. This charade is over." I looked at him. I looked at the man who had burned my grandson with cigarettes. I looked at the man who had broken his ribs and left them to heal crooked. I looked at the man who had sold a child for a kickback. And for the first time, I did not see Bradford Sterling, the successful real estate developer. I saw the mugshot Frank had shown me. I saw the con artist. I saw the killer. "You are not taking anyone anywhere," I said, my voice dead calm. "The police are on their way. Child Protective Services has been notified. And the doctors have documented everything. The broken ribs, the dehydration, the burns on his back." Brad's face did not change. He held his ground. "Those are old injuries," he said smoothly, a lie ready on his lips. "Leo does that to himself. He is a cutter. He burns himself. It is part of his sickness. That is why we sent him to the facility. To protect him from himself." "You are just enabling a sick child, Augustus. Now move." He took a step forward, invading my space, trying to use his size to intimidate me, trying to use his confidence to bully me just like he bullied Rachel. just like he bullied the police sergeant. He thought he was untouchable. He thought he was anonymous. I leaned in close until I could smell the stale tobacco on his breath. I looked him dead in the eyes, and I dropped the bomb. "Get out of here, Jerome." The effect was instantaneous. It was like I had shot him. Brad froze. His left eye twitched a violent spasm he could not control. The color drained from his face, leaving him gray and waxy. His mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. The arrogance evaporated, replaced by a primal, terrifying recognition. He knew that name. He had buried that name. And he knew that if I knew that name, I knew everything. He did not argue. He did not threaten me. He did not ask what I was talking about. He grabbed Rachel's arm. His grip was hard, painful. "We are leaving," he said, his voice tight and breathless. What Rachel asked, confused, looking from him to me. "Brad, what is going on? We cannot leave. Leo is in there." "We are leaving now," Brad hissed, dragging her backward. "This man is dangerous, Rachel. He is trying to frame us. We need to call our lawyer. Do not say another word to him." He pulled her away. Rachel stumbled, looking back at me, her eyes wide with confusion and fear, but she followed him. She always followed him. I watched them retreat down the hallway, Brad moving with the desperate speed of a rat that has just seen the trap snap shut. He was running, but he had no idea he was already caught. Rachel tore her arm from Brad's grip. She stumbled, but caught her balance, turning back toward me. I saw the conflict in her eyes, the war between the conditioning Brad had subjected her to and the primal instinct of a mother who knows her child is hurting. Brad hissed her name from the end of the hallway, a desperate command, but she ignored it. She ran back to me, her breath coming in ragged gasps. "Let me see him, Dad," she begged, grabbing my lapels. "I need to see him. I need to know he is okay." I did not move from the door. I could not let her in. Not yet. Not while she was still under Brad's spell. If she went in there now, she would look at Leo and see the addict Brad had invented. She would scold him for running away. She would break him all over again. I had to break her first. I reached into the large envelope the doctor had given me. It contained the preliminary photos taken for the police report. High-resolution, glossy prints of horror. "You want to see him?" I asked, my voice hard. "You want to see what your husband did?" I threw the photos at her. They fanned out in the air before fluttering to the floor between us. They landed face up like a tarot spread of violence. "Look at them, Rachel. Look at your son." She looked down. She tried to look away, but the images were magnetic in their brutality. The first photo showed Leo's back. It was a map of circular burns, red, angry, infected marks branded into his pale skin. "Those are cigarette burns, Rachel. Camel lights. The brand Brad smokes. Leo cannot reach the center of his own back. How did he do that to himself? Did he use a mirror?" She dropped to her knees, her hands hovering over the photos but terrified to touch them. She made a sound, a low, keening whimper that came from the back of her throat. "Look at the next one," I commanded, pointing to a close-up of Leo's ribcage. A massive purple hematoma bloomed across his side. 3 broken ribs. One of them is 6 weeks old. It healed crooked because you never took him to a doctor. You told me he fell off his bike. You told me he was clumsy. He was not clumsy, Rachel. He was being used as a punching bag." "No," she whispered, shaking her head, tears dripping onto the linoleum. "No, Brad loves him. He is strict, but he loves him. He would never—" "He sold him," I roared, the anger finally boiling over. "He sold him to that camp for a $3,000 a month kickback. He beat him to make him compliant, and then he shipped him off to be tortured so he could refinance your house and steal the equity." I grabbed her chin, forcing her to look up at me. "This is the man you chose, Rachel. This is the man you defended in the police station. This is the man you put above your own blood, Look at what he did. Look at your best man. She crumbled. It was not a graceful faint. It was a collapse. She curled forward, her forehead touching the cold floor, her hands clutching at her hair. The denial finally shattered under the weight of the evidence. She screamed a raw, tearing sound of absolute grief and guilt that echoed off the sterile walls. She saw it now. She saw the monster she had let into her home. She saw the pain she had allowed, and she saw that she was too late. I left Rachel on the floor of the hospital corridor, sobbing into the tile, her world fracturing into jagged shards of regret. Nurses were swarming around her, but I did not stay to help her up. I had done what I needed to do. I had broken the spell. Now I had to stop the magician before he vanished with the admission fee. I walked out into the cool night air, pulling my phone from my pocket. It was vibrating relentlessly. It was Victoria Graves. "Tell me you stopped him," answered, skipping the pleasantries. "I was too late, Gus," she said, her voice tight with professional frustration. "He is faster than we thought. He did not wait until morning. He triggered the wire transfer 11 minutes ago." I stopped walking, my hand gripping the door handle of my truck. "How?" The bank was closed. "Rachel is here. She could not have signed the release. He did not need her." Victoria explained, the sound of furious typing in the background. "He used a digital notary service. He uploaded a power of attorney document that gave him full control over her assets. I am looking at the digital signature right now, Gus. It is Rachel's signature, but the timestamp is from 20 minutes ago. Rachel was screaming in a hospital hallway 20 minutes ago. He forged it." I closed my eyes, seeing the sequence of events clearly in my mind. Brad fleeing the hospital, the panic of being recognized as Jerome Kincaid overriding his arrogance. He knew the game was up. He knew I had the scent. Most men would just run. They would grab a bag and hit the highway. But Jerome was a professional. He did not run empty-handed. He took the scorched earth policy. He executed the cash-out refinance on the house. Victoria continued, her voice cold. $500,000. The entire equity of the property plus the appreciation. He wired it to a shell corporation in the Cayman Islands. The bank flagged it as suspicious, but because he had the power of attorney and the pre-approval codes, the system let it through. By the time the fraud department wakes up tomorrow, that money will have bounced through 3 different jurisdictions and vanished into crypto. "He just left her homeless," I said, my voice flat. "He left her worse than homeless," Victoria corrected. "She still owns the debt, Gus. The mortgage is in her name. He took the cash and left her with a $500,000 loan she cannot pay. He did not just steal her past. He stole her future." I looked back at the hospital entrance. Rachel was inside, broken and weeping over the son she had failed. She did not know it yet, but she was also destitute. The house she loved, the home she thought she was building, was nothing but a hollow shell owned by a bank. "Freeze it," I ordered. "Call the bank president. Call the FBI. I am trying, Gus, but once the wire hits the SWIFT network, it is like trying to catch smoke with your bare hands. We might be able to claw it back eventually, but right now he has the liquidity. He has the war chest he needs to disappear." I hung up. I did not need to hear anymore. Brad had made his move. He had cashed out his chips. Now he was going to try to leave the casino. But he had made one fatal miscalculation. He thought the money was his exit ticket. He did not realize it was the weight that would sink him. He was rich now, and rich men get careless. I climbed into my truck and started the engine. He would not go to the airport. Too much security. He would not take the interstate. Too many cameras. He would go for the marina. He had mentioned a boat on the wiretap. I checked my weapon. I checked my mirrors. I was not going to the marina. I was going to the one place I knew he had to pass through to get there. I was going to the choke point. and I was going to make sure that $500,000 was the most expensive withdrawal he ever made. I drove away from the hospital, the red taillights of the ambulance fading in my rearview mirror. The road back to the city was dark, a ribbon of black asphalt winding through the coastal cliffs. I was tired. My bones ached from the cold of the mountain and the weight of the night, but my mind was razor sharp. I was running the map in my head, calculating the route to the marina, calculating the speed of a desperate man with $500,000 in stolen digital currency. I checked my mirrors. The road behind me was empty. Then suddenly it was not. Two blinding white orbs erupted from the darkness. High beams. They were too close and moving too fast. I did not have time to tap my brakes. I did not have time to signal. The impact hit me like a freight train. Metal screamed against metal. My heavy truck, which I had trusted for 10 years, was tossed forward like a toy. My head slammed back against the headrest, the world spinning into a blur of motion and light. The other vehicle, a lifted pickup with a heavy steel brush guard, did not back off. It hit me again. Harder. He was trying to push me off the road. To my right was the cliff edge, a sheer drop into the rocky surf below. I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles white. I did not panic. Panic is for amateurs and victims. I had taken defensive driving courses with the marshals back when I was prosecuting the mob. I knew the physics of a pit maneuver. I knew that if I hit the brakes, I would lose traction and go over the edge. I floored the accelerator. The engine roared a defiant protest. I turned the wheel sharply to the left into the attacking vehicle. It was counterintuitive, but it was the only way to stabilize. My truck slammed into the side of the pickup. Sparks showered the windshield like fireworks. The grinding noise was deafening, the sound of two steel beasts locking horns at 60 miles an hour. The driver of the pickup was surprised. He expected me to shy away. He expected the old man to be scared. He jerked his wheel, correcting too hard. His truck wobbled, the back end fishing out. I saw my opening. I slammed on the brakes. My truck shuddered and skidded, the tires screaming against the pavement, but I held the line. The pickup shot past me, unable to stop its momentum. It swerved, missing my front bumper by inches, and careened onto the shoulder gravel, spraying like buckshot. The driver recovered, but he had lost the element of surprise. He saw my headlights facing him now. He saw that I was not rolling down the cliff. He revved his engine once, a growl of frustration, then peeled out tires, smoking, disappearing into the darkness toward the highway. I sat there for a moment, the engine idling roughly. My hands were shaking now, the adrenaline dumping into my system. I checked my ribs, bruised but whole. I checked my weapon, still in the holster. I stepped out of the truck to inspect the damage. The rear bumper was crushed. The side panel was caved in, but the truck was drivable. I looked at the skid marks on the road. This was not road rage. This was not a drunk driver. He knew I was coming. He knew I had identified him at the hospital. Jerome Kincaid had stopped running and started fighting. He wanted me dead. He wanted to silence the only man who knew his real name. I wiped a smear of blood from my forehead where it had hit the steering wheel. I looked into the dark void where the ocean crashed against the rocks below. He had tried to throw me into that abyss. He missed. I got back into the truck. The door creaked, but it closed. I put it in gear. He thought this would scare me. He thought this would make me turn back. He did not understand. He had just confirmed that he was terrified. And a terrified man makes mistakes. I was not going back to the hotel. I was going to finish this. I drove the battered truck into the shadows of a parking garage near the harbor. The engine sputtered and died a final death. It had served its purpose. I sat there in the dark, touching the bandage on my head where the steering wheel had kissed me. My ribs ached and my hands were bruised, but my mind was moving at light speed. Jerome Kincaid had tried to kill me because I was a threat. He tried to run me off the road because I was the hunter. So I decided to stop being the hunter. It was time to become the carcass. I pulled out my phone. The screen was cracked but functional. I dialed Victoria Graves. She picked up on the first ring, her voice tight with worry. "Gus, where are you? The police scanner just reported a hit and run on the coastal highway. Please tell me that was not you." "It was me," I said, my voice raspy. "But I am walking away." "Thank God," she breathed. "I will send a car. We need to get you into protective custody. This man is escalating. He is not just a fraudster, Gus. He is a killer." "No," I said, cutting her off. "That is exactly what he expects. He expects me to run to the police. He expects me to file a report and hide behind a badge. If I do that, he vanishes. He takes the $500,000 and disappears into the wind. I need him to stay. I need him to come to me." "What are you proposing, Gus?" "I am proposing a funeral, Victoria, or close to it. I want you to leak a story. Call his lawyer. Call the hospital contacts. Call anyone who will listen. Tell them the accident was worse than it looked. Tell them I have a subdural hematoma. Tell them I am drifting in and out of consciousness, and the prognosis is poor." There was silence on the line as she processed the lie. She was a lawyer. She knew the risks of fabricating a medical condition, but she also knew the man we were fighting. And then I added the hook, the bait that a shark like Jerome cannot resist. Tell them that in my lucid moments I am asking for my daughter. Tell them I am terrified of dying without settling my affairs. Tell them I want to sign over the deed to the lake house and the remaining municipal bonds to Rachel to avoid probate court. Tell them I want to make peace before I go. "Gus, that is insane," Victoria said, but I could hear the gears turning in her head. "He just tried to kill you. He knows you know who he is. He will not believe it." "He will believe it because he is a narcissist," I replied. "He thinks he is smarter than everyone in the room. He thinks the car crash was a success. He will think he rattled me, that he broke my brain. He will think the trauma made the old man soft and sentimental. And more importantly, he is greedy. He already stole $500,000, but the lake house is worth another $3 million. He won't be able to walk away from a free payday, especially if he thinks I am too weak to stop him." "It is a trap," she whispered. "It is a kill box," I corrected. "Set the meeting for tomorrow morning at 10. My room at the Grand Hotel. Tell him I am bedridden and can barely speak. Tell him to bring the notary because I want to sign everything over immediately. And Victoria makes sure he believes I am fading fast." I hung up the phone. I leaned back in the broken seat and closed my eyes. I was not going to a hospital to get treated. I was going to a hardware store. I needed heavy-duty zip ties. I needed duct tape. And I needed to make sure that when Jerome Kincaid walked into that hotel room, thinking he was coming to pick the bones of a dying man, he was actually walking into the grip of a ghost. The trap was set. Now I just had to wait for the rat to smell the cheese. Frank walked into the dim hotel room where I was sitting in the dark, nursing a glass of water and a headache that felt like a split axe in my skull. He did not ask how I was feeling. He knew better. He held up his tablet, the screen glowing blue in the shadows. "You were right, Gus," Frank said, shaking his head in disbelief. "You called it perfectly." He took the bait hook, line, and sinker. He pressed play. The audio was crisp, captured from the bug we still had in Brad's car. It was a phone call to his private charter pilot. "Change the flight plan," Brad's voice said. "I am not leaving tonight. Push it to tomorrow at noon." Yeah, something came up. A business opportunity I cannot walk away from. The old man is checking out. He wants to settle. It is free money. I would be an idiot to leave it on the table. He laughed. It was that same arrogant laugh I had heard in the garage. The laugh of a man who thinks he is the chess master when he is actually just a pawn. I leaned forward, listening to the next part. Brad was calling his tailor. "I need the tuxedo pressed and ready by 6, he ordered. "Yes, for the Children's Hospital Gala. I am still going. I am the platinum sponsor. People expect to see me. I have to make an appearance before I wrap things up here." I sat back, the ghost of a smile touching my lips. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of a hunter watching the prey step into the snare. Jerome Kincaid could not help himself. He was a narcissist of the highest order. He had the money. He had the fake passport. He could have been halfway to Mexico by now, disappearing into the tequila sunset. But he could not leave without one last round of applause. He wanted to walk into that ballroom under the crystal chandeliers and have the mayor shake his hand. He wanted to hear the wealthy elite of the city tell him what a good man he was. He wanted to play the role of the saint one last time before he shed the skin and became a ghost again. "He thinks he has won," Frank said, turning off the tablet. "He thinks you are brain-damaged and desperate to buy his forgiveness. He thinks he is going to go to the party tonight, collect his accolades, and then come here tomorrow morning to rob you blind before he flies away." "He is drunk on his own legend," I said, standing up slowly. My legs felt heavy, but my resolve was iron. "He thinks he is untouchable. He thinks the world is just a stage for him to perform on." I walked to the window looking out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Brad was getting a shave. He was putting on his expensive cufflinks. He was practicing his humble smile in the mirror. He had no idea that the man he thought he killed was standing in a hotel room 5 miles away, watching the clock. "He wants a show," I said, turning back to Frank. "He wants to be the center of attention. He wants everyone to look at him." I walked over to the bed where my dress uniform hung in a garment bag. The uniform I had not worn since I retired. The navy blue wool. The gold buttons. The medals I never talked about. "Fine," I said, unzipping the bag. "If he wants an audience, let's give him one. But he is not going to like the ending. We are going to that gala, Frank. And we are going to make sure it is a night he never forgets." The grand ballroom of the hotel was a cavern of light and noise. Crystal chandeliers the size of small cars hung from the ceiling, casting a diamond brilliance over the city's elite. It smelled of expensive perfume prime rib and self-congratulations. 300 people in tuxedos and designer gowns were sipping champagne, unaware that they were watching a predator in his natural habitat. At the center of the stage stood Bradford Sterling. He looked immaculate. His tuxedo fit him like a second skin, the midnight blue fabric absorbing the spotlight. He held a microphone in one hand and a glass of sparkling cider in the other, playing the part of the benevolent philanthropist to perfection. He was not just attending the gala. He was the star. He was the platinum sponsor, using Rachel's stolen equity to buy the admiration of strangers one last time before he disappeared. "Ladies and gentlemen," Brad said, his voice booming with that practiced warmth that made people want to trust him. "We live in a world that is often cold, a world that can be dangerous for our children. That is why we are here tonight, because there is nothing more important, nothing more sacred than the safety of our youth." He paused, letting the sentiment hang in the air. The crowd nodded in agreement, mesmerized. "I know this personally," Brad continued, placing a hand over his heart. "Being a stepfather has been the greatest challenge and the greatest joy of my life. It has taught me patience. It has taught me that love is not just a feeling. It is a shield. We must be the shield for those who cannot protect themselves." To his right, standing in the shadow of the podium, was Rachel. She looked like a ghost haunting her own life. She was wearing a stunning red dress, but it hung loosely on her frame as if she had shrunk inside it. Her face was pale, the makeup applied thick to cover the ravages of grief and sleeplessness. She was not looking at the crowd. She was staring at the floor, her hands clasped in front of her, so tightly her knuckles were white. Brad turned to her, extending a hand with a smile that did not reach his eyes. "Come here, darling," he said, his voice dripping with affection. Rachel hesitated. For a split second I saw the revolt in her eyes. I saw the urge to scream, to run, to tear the mask off his face. But then Brad took a step toward her. He placed his hand on the small of her back. To the audience, it looked like a loving gesture, but I knew what it was. It was a pressure point, a reminder. Smile or else. Rachel stepped into the light. She looked up at the crowd and forced a smile onto her face. It was a brittle, painful thing, a crack in a porcelain doll. She stood next to the man who had tortured her son and robbed her blind, and she played her part because she was terrified. "Thank you," Brad said, wrapping his arm around her, pulling her close. "We are just a humble family trying to do our part." The room erupted in applause. Men clapped their hands. Women wiped tears from their eyes. They saw a hero and his devoted wife. They did not see the bruises on her soul. They did not see the wolf licking his chops. Brad soaked it in beaming, waving to the mayor in the front row. He was high on the deception, drunk on his own ability to manipulate reality. He thought he had won. He thought the story ended here with him on a stage and me in a grave. He had no idea that the doors at the back of the room were about to open. He had no idea that the applause was about to stop. The applause was just beginning to fade when the heavy double doors at the back of the ballroom swung open with a sound like a thunderclap. The noise cut through the polite chatter and the clinking of crystal glasses. Heads turned. 300 of the city's most powerful people looked back, expecting to see a waiter with a tray, or perhaps a late dignitary. They did not expect to see me. I stood framed in the archway. I was not in a wheelchair. I was not hooked up to an IV drip. I was not the frail, dying old man that Victoria had promised. I was wearing my charcoal gray suit, the one I had worn for every closing argument of my career. The suit I wore when I looked murderers in the eye and sent them away for life. My shirt was crisp and white. My tie was dark as midnight. I had polished my shoes until they shone like obsidian. My ribs screamed in protest with every breath. My head throbbed where the steering wheel had tried to crack my skull. My body was a map of bruises and aches. But I pushed the pain down deep into the boiler room of my gut and used it as fuel. I locked my knees. I squared my shoulders. I lifted my chin. I took the first step. The room went deadly silent. The jazz band stopped playing mid-note. The only sound in the cavernous hall was the rhythmic, heavy thud of my footsteps on the plush carpet. I did not limp. I did not use a cane. I marched. It was the walk of a man who knows the law is on his side and hell is following close behind. The crowd parted for me like the Red Sea. I saw the mayor's jaw drop. I saw the police chief spill his wine. They whispered as I passed, "Is that Augustus King?" I thought he was in a coma. I thought he was dying. I ignored them. My world had narrowed down to a single point of focus. The stage, the spotlight, and the man standing in the center of it. Bradford Sterling was frozen. He had been in the middle of a toast, his hand raised high, holding a flute of champagne. The glass stopped halfway to his mouth. It hovered there, trembling slightly. His face, which moments ago had been flushed with the warmth of adoration, drained of all color. He looked like a wax figure that had been left out in the sun. The charming smile slid off his face, leaving behind a mask of pure, unadulterated terror. He blinked rapid spasms that betrayed his panic. He looked at the side exits, but he knew he couldn't run. He was trapped by the very spotlight he craved. He was trapped by the audience he had courted. If he ran now, he admitted guilt. If he stayed, he faced me. Rachel stood beside him. She gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. Her eyes filled with sudden shock, and then a desperate dawning hope. She saw me. She really saw me. Not the meddling father. Not the retired has-been. She saw the hammer. I reached the front of the room. I stopped at the foot of the stairs leading up to the stage. I looked up at him. I did not say a word. I let the silence stretch until it was almost unbearable. I let him look at the man he tried to kill. I let him see that he had failed. The predator was suddenly the prey, and he had nowhere left to hide. I climbed the 3 wooden steps to the stage. They felt miles high. Brad retreated, his heels clicking frantically against the hardwood floor. He looked at me as if I were a demon rising from the pit. He looked at my chest, expecting to see the steering wheel-shaped bruise that should have killed me. But I was standing tall. I was breathing, and I was coming for him. I did not rush. I walked straight to him and reached out. I took the microphone from his trembling hand. He did not fight me. He was too paralyzed by the impossible sight of his victim returning from the dead. I turned to face the room. 300 faces stared back at me in stunned silence. The mayor had lowered his glass. The police chief was standing up. I looked at the camera crews at the back of the room, the ones broadcasting this gala live to the evening news. Perfect. I apologize for the interruption, I said, my voice booming through the high-fidelity speakers, clear and steady. I am sorry I am late, but I did not want to miss the toast. And I brought a gift, not for Bradford Sterling, but for Jerome. I raised my hand, which held a small black remote control. I pointed it at the massive projection screen behind us, the one that had been displaying the logo of the children's hospital. I pressed the button. The screen flickered. The logo vanished. In its place, a grainy black and white video appeared. It was footage Frank had recovered from the cloud server of the home security system, the footage Brad thought he had deleted. It showed the living room of my daughter's house. The timestamp was from last month. The image was undeniable. It showed Brad looming over Leo. It showed the boy backing away, his hands raised in defense. It showed the man the city called a saint delivering a vicious backhand that sent the 14-year-old crumbling to the floor. It showed him kicking the boy while he was down. A collective gasp sucked the air out of the ballroom. A woman in the front row screamed. But I was not done. Turn up the sound, I commanded into the microphone. The video cut to black, but the audio remained. It was the recording from the garage, the one Frank had captured just 24 hours ago. Brad's voice filled the cavernous hall, amplified to a deafening volume. "She is a mess," the voice sneered. "She is so desperate she will sign anything. She is just a stupid, lonely cash cow. I milked her dry, and now it is time to take the beef to the slaughterhouse." The silence that followed was absolute. It was the silence of a tomb. Every person in that room heard it. Every person heard the contempt, the greed, the pure evil dripping from his voice. I turned to look at Rachel. She was staring at the screen, her eyes wide and unseeing, her hands covering her mouth. She had heard it. She had heard the man she loved call her a cow. She had heard him plan her destruction. I looked at Brad. He was shaking his head, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. He looked at the crowd, searching for a friendly face, searching for an escape. But there were no friendly faces left. There was only disgust. The mask had not just slipped. I had ripped it off and set it on fire. "This is who he is," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "This is the man you applauded." Brad lunged. He realized the game was over. He realized his reputation was ash. He did the only thing a cornered rat knows how to do. He attacked. He rushed at me, his hands reaching for my throat, his face twisted into a snarl of pure hate. But I was ready. I had been waiting for this moment for 40 years. Jerome's fingers were inches from my throat, when a voice cut through the air like a razor wire. It was not loud. It was not a scream. It was a whisper that carried the weight of a grave. "Jerome." He froze. It was a reflex buried deep in his reptile brain. He knew that voice. But that was impossible. That voice belonged to a corpse. That voice had been silenced 10 years ago at the bottom of a marble staircase in a Santa Fe villa. He turned slowly, his hands dropping to his sides, the murderous rage on his face replaced by a confusion so profound it looked like madness. I stepped back, straightening my tie, and looked toward the heavy velvet curtains at the side of the stage. Frank Russo stepped out. He was pushing a wheelchair. Sitting in the chair was a woman who looked like she had been glued back together from broken pieces. Her face was a map of tragedy. One side of her mouth drooped slightly from nerve damage, and a long pale scar ran from her temple to her jaw. Her hair was gray and thin, but her eyes were burning. They were burning with a fire that had been kept alive for a decade of pain and rehabilitation. The crowd parted instinctively. They did not know who she was, but they felt the power of her presence. The silence in the room was suffocating. Jerome staggered back. He looked like he was seeing a ghost. His skin turned the color of old ash. He began to shake violently, his knees buckling as if the strings holding him up had been cut. "No," he whispered, his voice trembling. "No. You are dead. I checked. You were dead." The woman lifted her hand. It was a struggle. Her arm trembled from the effort, fighting against years of atrophy, but she forced it up until her finger pointed straight at his heart. "I did not die, Jerome," she said, her voice raspy but gaining strength with every word. "You pushed me. You stood at the top of the stairs, and you watched me fall. You waited until I stopped moving. You checked my pulse and you smiled. And then you walked away to find the safe." She looked at the crowd, her gaze sweeping over the horrified faces of the city's elite, the people who had toasted this man only minutes ago. "My name is Vanessa Kincaid. I was his first wife. The police called it an accident. He told them I tripped on the carpet, but I was in a coma for 6 months. When I woke up, he was gone. He had taken my money, my house, and my identity. He thought I took the secret to the grave. He thought I was just another loose end he had tied up." She turned her gaze back to him. "I spent 10 years learning how to talk again just so I could say this to you. I spent 10 years learning to point my finger just so I could identify you." Jerome looked for an exit. He looked at the window. He looked at the kitchen doors. But there was nowhere to go. The past he had buried had clawed its way out of the earth. "That is him," she screamed, the sound tearing from her throat with raw agony. "That is the man who tried to kill me. That is the monster." The accusation hung in the air, a final damning verdict. Rachel let out a sob, covering her face, unable to look at the man she had married. The mayor turned his back on the stage. The illusion was gone. There was no philanthropist. There was no loving stepfather. There was only a man who pushed women downstairs and locked boys in boxes. And now everyone saw him naked in the light. The ballroom exploded. It was not the polite murmur of high society anymore. It was the roar of a crowd that realized they had been dining with a monster. People were shouting, pointing fingers, backing away from the stage, as if the man in the tuxedo was contagious. The cameras flashed blindly, capturing the disintegration of a lie in real time. Jerome Kincaid did not look at his wife. He did not look at the woman in the wheelchair who had just returned from the grave to damn him. He looked at the red exit sign glowing above the kitchen doors at the far end of the room. It was his only way out. The main doors were blocked by the press. The side doors were locked. He made his choice. He jumped off the stage, abandoning his dignity. He shoved a waiter aside, sending a tray of champagne crashing to the floor. He sprinted through the crowd, his face slick with sweat, his eyes wide with the terror of a trapped animal. He pushed past the mayor. He knocked over a chair. He was running for his life, running toward the darkness of the alley behind the hotel where he thought he could disappear again. I did not chase him. I did not even step off the podium. I just watched him run. Because I knew he was not running to freedom. He was running into a wall. He reached the kitchen doors. He reached out his hand to push them open, expecting to burst into the cool night air. Instead, the doors swung open from the inside. Sergeant Kowalski filled the frame. He was not wearing his uniform. He was wearing his dress blues, but tonight they did not look ceremonial. They looked like armor. He stood there like a boulder in a stream, immovable and solid. "Move!" Sergeant Brad screamed, his voice cracking. "Get out of my way, or I will ruin you." Kowalski did not flinch. He did not look at the floor. He did not look at his shoes. He looked Jerome Kincaid right in the eye. "You are already ruined," Kowalski said, his voice carrying over the din. "And I am done taking orders from you." Brad tried to push past him. It was a mistake. Kowalski grabbed his arm. It was not a gentle grip. It was the grip of a man who had carried the guilt of a battered child for 3 days and was finally putting it down. He spun Brad around with a force that lifted him off his feet. He slammed him face first against the wall next to the stage. The sound of the impact silenced the room once again. Kowalski pulled the handcuffs from his belt. The metal glinted in the spotlight. "Bradford Sterling, you are under arrest for fraud, identity theft, and attempted murder." Kowalski announced, his voice ringing with authority. He snapped the cuffs onto Brad's wrists. Click. Click. The sound was final. It was the sound of a steel door slamming shut on a lifetime of lies. Brad slumped against the wall, the fight draining out of him, leaving him small and pathetic. Kowalski hauled him up by his collar and turned him to face the room, to face Rachel, to face me. I looked at the sergeant. He nodded at me. Just once, a silent acknowledgement between two men who had walked through the mud to find the truth. The police were finally doing their job. The monster was in chains. The heavy oak doors closed behind Sergeant Kowalski and the prisoner, leaving a vacuum of silence in the ballroom. The show was over. The villain had been dragged off stage in chains. But the tragedy was just beginning. I stood on the podium, my hand still gripping the microphone, looking down at the woman in the red dress. Rachel stood alone in the center of the room. The crowd had pulled back from her, creating a wide circle of empty floor, as if her bad judgment was a contagion they did not want to catch. She looked small. She looked shattered. The reality of what had just happened crashed down on her in waves. I could see it hitting her one blow at a time. First was the humiliation. 300 pairs of eyes judging her, whispering about how she had been fooled, how she had brought a monster into their circle. Then came the financial ruin. She looked at the screen where the video had played, remembering the voice of her husband, calling her a cash cow. She realized with a sudden, sickening clarity that the house she loved, the equity she had worked for, was gone. The papers she had signed without reading the refinance Brad had urged her to do it was all real. She was destitute. She was homeless. But then came the final blow, the one that buckled her knees. Leo. She thought of her son. She thought of the bruises she had ignored. She thought of the lies she had told herself to keep the peace. She realized that while she was playing dress-up at a gala, her son was shivering in a metal box, praying for a grandfather he hadn't seen in years because his mother had abandoned him. Her legs gave out. She did not swoon gracefully. She dropped. She hit the floor hard, her expensive dress pooling around her like spilt wine. She buried her hands in her hair and let out a sob that was not human. It was the sound of a soul breaking. "Dad." She looked up at me. Her mascara was running down her cheeks in black rivulets. Her eyes were pleading. She was the little girl who had scraped her knee. She was the teenager who had crashed her car. She was looking for the man who had always fixed it. She wanted me to come down there. She wanted me to pick her up, to tell her it was going to be okay, to tell her that I would handle the bank and the lawyers and the shame. "Dad, please help me," she whispered, reaching a hand out toward the stage. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. I looked at her outstretched hand. My heart ached. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to go to her, to hold my child, to tell her that she was a victim too. But then I thought of the cigarette burns on Leo's back. I thought of the crooked rib that had healed wrong because she didn't take him to a doctor. I thought of the way she had looked at me in the hospital corridor and chosen Jerome over her own blood. I did not move. I did not step down from the stage. I stood there like a statue carved from gray stone. I looked her in the eye, and I let her see the cold, hard truth. I was not her savior tonight. I was not her safety net. I was Leo's grandfather, and she was the woman who had let the wolf in the door. I stayed silent. I turned my back on her. I walked away from the podium, leaving her kneeling on the floor amidst the wreckage of the life she had chosen. She had to find her own way up. I had a grandson to save. The flashing lights of the squad cars had finally faded into the city traffic, leaving the hotel entrance looking strangely empty. I stood under the awning, lighting a cigar I had been saving for 10 years. It did not taste like victory. It tasted like ash and exhaustion. The ballroom upstairs was empty now, the guests having scurried away to gossip about the scandal over late-night drinks. I was alone with the silence until Victoria Graves stepped out of the shadows. She looked tired. Her sharp blazer was unbuttoned, and she was holding her phone like a lifeline. She stood beside me and watched the smoke curl up into the night air. She did not offer congratulations. She knew me too well for that. She knew that putting a man in handcuffs was only the first half of the job. The wreckage he left behind still had to be sorted. "We got the confirmation from the bank," Victoria said, her voice low. "The federal injunction hit the SWIFT network at 9 o'clock exactly." "Did we stop it?" I asked, staring at the ember of my cigar. "We stopped half of it," she replied. "He moved fast, Gus, faster than any amateur I have ever seen. By the time the freeze order locked the account, he had already transferred $250,000 to a shell company in Belize. That money is gone. It will take years of litigation to even try to claw it back, and by then the lawyer's fees will have eaten most of it." I nodded slowly. $250,000. It was a fortune to most people. To Rachel, it was the safety net she had taken for granted her entire life. "But the rest is safe," Victoria continued. "The second transfer failed. We saved about half of her liquid assets. And the deed to the lake house. He tried to sign that over too, but the notary flagged the signature because of the timestamp. So she is not on the street." I said more to myself than to her. "No, she is not on the street," Victoria said. "But the house is underwater. The mortgage he took out is real, Gus. The bank owns 90% of that property now. She is going to have to sell it just to pay off the debt. She is going to lose the lifestyle. She is going to house the country club membership and the fancy car. She is going to have to get a job. She is going to have to learn what the word budget means." I took a long drag of the cigar. "Good," I said. Victoria looked at me surprised. "Good," she repeated. "She just lost half her inheritance, Gus. She needed to lose it," I said, blowing the smoke into the darkness. Money was the cushion that made her soft. Money was the reason she didn't ask questions. She thought her checkbook could solve every problem, including a lonely heart. Now she has to survive. Now she has to struggle. It will be the best thing that ever happened to her. If she has to work, she won't have time to fall for the next con artist who walks through the door." Victoria sighed and put her phone in her pocket. "The district attorney wants a statement," she said, shifting back to business. "They are charging him with everything. Attempted murder of Vanessa Kincaid, child abuse, fraud, grand larceny. He is looking at 20 years minimum. Maybe life if the judge is in a bad mood." "Let him rot," I said, dropping the cigar and crushing it under my heel. "I am done with the law tonight. I have one more stop to make." I walked toward my truck. The legal battle was over. The financial bleeding had been staunched. But there was one account that still needed to be settled. The one with the boy waiting in the hospital bed. That That was the only equity I cared about now. The wheels of justice turn slow, but they grind exceedingly fine. It took 6 months to get there. 6 months of depositions and motions and lawyers trying to plea bargain. But in the end, the system worked. I sat in the back row of the federal courthouse and watched them bring him in. Bradford Sterling, or Jerome Kincaid, or whatever name he was planning to use next. He wasn't wearing an Italian tuxedo this time. He was wearing an orange jumpsuit that was 2 sizes too big. He wasn't charming the jury. He was staring at his shoes, the arrogance finally stripped away by half a year in county lockup. The judge was a woman who had no patience for predators. She read the verdict with a voice like flint. Guilty on all counts: fraud, identity theft, kidnapping, child abuse. When she delivered the sentence, 25 years in a maximum security penitentiary, without the possibility of parole, Brad didn't even flinch. He just slumped a little lower in his chair. He was done. The vampire had been dragged into the sun and turned to dust. I watched the bailiff lead him away, the chains on his ankles clinking on the marble floor. It was the sweetest sound I had ever heard, but the gavel didn't stop swinging there. The family court hearing was harder to watch. Rachel stood before a different judge pleading to keep her son. She cried. She promised she had changed. She said she was a victim too. But the judge looked at the photos of the cigarette burns. He looked at the medical reports of the broken ribs. He looked at Rachel and told her that ignorance is not a defense when you are a mother. Negligence, he said, is just as dangerous as malice. He stripped her of custody. It is temporary pending a psychological evaluation and proof of stability, but it broke her. I walked out of that courtroom with legal guardianship of Leo. Rachel walked out with nothing. I drove past the diner on Main Street yesterday. It is a small place, the kind where the coffee is strong and the truckers stop for breakfast. I sat in my truck and watched through the window. Rachel was there. She wasn't wearing designer silk. She was wearing a polyester blue uniform with a name tag that looked crooked. Her hair was tied back in a messy bun, and she looked exhausted. She was carrying a heavy tray of plates, moving between the tables with a speed I didn't know she possessed. She is working double shifts. The bank took 90% of her assets to cover the fraudulent loans Brad took out, but she fought to keep the house. She is underwater on the mortgage, paying off a debt that isn't hers. She sold the Mercedes. She sold the jewelry. Now she lives on tips and minimum wage. I watched her pour coffee for a rude customer who didn't even look up. The old Rachel would have fallen apart. The old Rachel would have called me crying for a check. But this Rachel just wiped the table, took the insults, and moved on to the next customer. She looked tired. She looked older. But for the first time in her life, she looked real. I didn't go in. I didn't offer to pay off the mortgage. She needs this. She needs to feel the weight of the world so she can learn how to carry it. She needs to understand that a home isn't something you buy with a husband's money. It is something you build with your own hands. I put the truck in gear and drove away. She has a long road ahead of her, but at least she is finally driving. The cabin smells of cedar and old coffee now the way it always used to before the world got complicated. It is a quiet place. We do not have high ceilings or marble staircases here. We have pine floors that creak when you walk on them, and a wood stove that needs feeding every few hours. It is a simple life, and for the first time in years, I see the tension leaving my grandson's shoulders. Leo is healing. It is a slow process, like watching a bruised flower try to turn back toward the sun, but it is happening. The cast came off his ribs 3 weeks ago. He took a deep breath that day, filling his lungs all the way up without wincing, and I saw a shadow cross his face as if he had forgotten what it felt like to breathe without pain. He has put on 15 pounds. He does not look like a scarecrow anymore. His cheeks have some color, and the dark circles under his eyes have faded into a healthy tiredness from hard work rather than the exhaustion of fear. We have a routine. Routine is good for him. It is predictable. It is safe. We get up at 6, we eat eggs and toast, we work on the truck, or we fix the fence line. He likes working with his hands. He likes the logic of it. If a fence post is broken, you replace it. If an engine is stalling, you clean the carburetor. It is not like people. Machines do not lie to you. They do not say they love you and then hurt you. He understands the rules here, and for now, that is enough. But there are ghosts that even the quiet of the woods cannot banish. Every Sunday evening, the phone rings. We both know who it is. It is the only time the landline rings. Leo sits at the kitchen table doing his homework. He stops writing when the ringing starts. He does not look up. He stares at the pencil in his hand, his knuckles turning white. I answer it. It is always Rachel. Her voice is different now. It is thinner, stripped of the entitlement she used to wear like armor. She sounds humble. She sounds desperate. She asks how he is. She asks if he is eating. She asks if she can come visit just for an hour, just to sit on the porch. I look at Leo. I do not cover the mouthpiece. I do not hide the truth from him. I respect him too much for that. It is your mother, Leo, I say, my voice neutral. Do you want to talk to her? He does not flinch anymore. He does not hide under the bed or shake with panic the way he did in the hospital. He just looks at the phone, and then he looks at me. His eyes are old. They are too old for a 14-year-old boy. They are the eyes of someone who has seen the person who was supposed to protect him look the other way while he was burning. No, Grandpa, he says softly. Not today. I nod. I do not push him. I do not give him a speech about family or forgiveness. Forgiveness is expensive, and he has already paid too much. I put the phone back to my ear. He is not ready, Rachel, I tell her. I hear her crying on the other end. It is a jagged, painful sound. She begs me. She says she is trying. She says she is sorry. I know you are, I say, but sorry does not erase the scars on his back. You broke the trust, Rachel. You cannot fix a shattered mirror with a tube of glue and a Sunday phone call. It takes time, maybe years, maybe forever. I hang up. I do not say goodbye. I walk back to the table and sit down across from him. We do not talk about it. He picks up his pencil and goes back to his math problems. The silence settles back over the cabin, but it is not an empty silence. It is a protective one. He knows that as long as he is here, he has the power to say no. He knows that in this house his voice matters. And that is the first step to becoming a man who will never let anyone put him in a box again. The morning mist hung low over the surface of the lake, a white blanket that softened the edges of the world. It was quiet out here. The kind of quiet you can only find when you are miles away from the city, miles away from courtrooms, and miles away from the mistakes of the past. The only sounds were the gentle lap of water against the aluminum hull of our small boat and the rhythmic clicking of a fishing reel. I sat in the stern watching the boy in the bow. Leo was wearing a thick wool sweater that used to belong to me. It was too big for him. The sleeves rolled up at the cuffs, but he looked solid. He held the fishing rod with a steady hand. His focus was absolute. There was no shaking. There was no looking over his shoulder to see who was coming. The flinching was gone. For a long time, I thought my legacy would be the cases I won. I thought it would be the criminals I put behind bars, the headlines in the papers, the reputation of Augustus King, the man who never lost. I spent 40 years building that statue, thinking it would be enough to mark my place in the world. But sitting here on this cold lake watching my grandson breathe the clean air, I realized that none of that mattered. The convictions, the verdicts, the applause, it was all just dust. This was the only verdict that counted. Leo turned to me. The sun was breaking through the mist, illuminating his face. He didn't smile often, not yet, but there was a peace in his eyes that hadn't been there before. "Do you think they are biting today, Grandpa?" he asked, his voice carrying easily across the water. "They might be," I said, leaning back against the bench. "But even if they are not, it is a good day to be out." He nodded, turning back to the water. "We are taught that family is an absolute, that it is a contract signed in blood at birth that cannot be broken. We are told that we must forgive our mothers and fathers no matter what they do, because they gave us life." But looking at Leo, I knew that was a lie. Biology is just an accident of nature. It makes you relatives, but it does not make you family. Family is not the people who share your DNA. Family is the people who stand in front of the door when the wolf knocks. Family is the people who see your pain when everyone else looks away. Family is the people who pull you out of the box. Rachel gave him life, but she could not give him safety. She chose her own comfort over his survival. That is a debt that cannot be paid with a simple apology. Maybe one day Leo will find the grace to let her back in. Maybe he won't. But that choice belongs to him. It is not my job to force it. It is my job to make sure he never has to make that choice out of fear again. My line tugged. A small perch, nothing worth keeping. I reeled it in, unhooked it gently, and tossed it back into the dark water. I looked at my hands. They were old hands now, weathered and scarred. They had held gavels and guns and subpoenas, but now they just held a fishing rod. And that was enough. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the scent of pine and water. The anger that had fueled me for so long, the rage that had driven me to break down gates and threaten judges, was finally gone. The fire was out. In its place was a warm, steady ember of satisfaction. I had fought my last war. I had won my last case. The file was closed. I looked at Leo one last time. He was watching the bobber dance on the ripples, waiting for his moment. He was safe. He was whole. He was free. I pulled my hat down low over my eyes and settled into the quiet. The hammer was retired. Today I was just a grandfather fishing with his boy. And for the first time in my life, I was completely at peace. This story stands as a powerful reminder that the title of family is not a right granted by biology, but a privilege earned through protection and sacrifice. Rachel's tragic failure teaches us that willful blindness to abuse is just as destructive as the violence itself. Silence is not neutrality, it is complicity. Conversely, Gus demonstrates that true love is an active force. It is the unrelenting courage to tear down walls, defy systems, and risk everything to shield the vulnerable. Ultimately, family is not defined by whose blood runs in your veins, but by who remains standing by your side when the darkness comes. If Gus's journey moved you, please share this story to help spread the message that every child deserves a protector who never gives up.